What if everything we think we know about the past is wrong? Scattered across the globe, hidden beneath layers of earth and time, lie secrets so strange they defy explanation, monuments built with impossible precision, artifacts that shouldn't exist, and stories passed down through generations that hint at knowledge lost to history. Ancient civilizations left behind clues like breadcrumbs, but instead of leading us to answers, they've only deepened the mystery. Today, we're setting off on a journey to uncover 50 of these enigmas, each one a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the picture we've been taught. Think about the last time you stood before an ancient ruin or gazed at an artifact in a museum. That whisper of awe you felt, that's the same pull that's driven explorers and scholars for centuries, the irresistible urge to solve what seems unsolvable. From the towering stones of Baalbek, so massive modern cranes couldn't lift them, to the eerie precision of the Antikythera Mechanism, a 2,000-year-old device that resembles a steampunk computer, these aren't just curiosities. They're challenges, silent taunts from the past, daring us to figure out how or why or who, and the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. This isn't just a catalogue of oddities. It's a detective story without an ending, a treasure map where X marks a question instead of a spot. Were these feats the work of advanced cultures we've forgotten, or something even more extraordinary? As we peel back the layers of these 50 mysteries, you'll start to see patterns, threads connecting civilizations that supposedly never met, technologies that seem out of place, and legends that might be more than myth. So suspend what you think you know for a moment. The past isn't as settled as our textbooks claim, and the truth, well, it might be far wilder than we've ever imagined. Ready to begin, the Great Pyramids of Giza stand as silent, staggering monuments to human ambition, or do they? Even after centuries of study, we still can't say for certain how an ancient civilization, working over 4,500 years ago, managed to construct these geometric marvels with such jaw-dropping precision. The sheer scale alone baffles modern engineers. Take the Great Pyramid of Khufu, for example. Built from an estimated 2,300,000 stone blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons, it's aligned to true north with an error margin of just 1/15 of a degree. That's a level of accuracy we'd struggle to achieve even today with satellite technology. So how did they do it? The most widely accepted theory points to ramps, massive earthen slopes that workers used to drag stones into place. But here's the catch, no trace of these ramps has ever been found. And if they existed, the sheer volume of material needed to build them would rival the pyramids themselves. Then there's the logistics. Recent experiments show that even with teams of workers, moving stones of that size would require near impossible coordination, especially when you consider that the pyramid rises to 480 feet with near flawless symmetry. Of course, the absence of clear answers has given rise to wilder theories. Some suggest advanced lost technologies, perhaps tools or techniques that have since vanished from history. Ancient astronaut theorists go further, pointing to the pyramid's alignment with celestial bodies as possible evidence of extraterrestrial influence. But here's what's truly fascinating. The Egyptians left behind no blueprints, no engineering notes, just the pyramids themselves, as if they were meant to be the final word on the matter. What makes this mystery even more compelling is the quiet defiance of the pyramids. They refuse to fit neatly into our understanding of the ancient world. Every new study, every fresh scan with ground-penetrating radar seems to raise more questions than answers. Why such precision for a tomb? If it was just about honoring a pharaoh, why push architectural limits to this extreme? Each stone seems to whisper that we're missing something fundamental, a piece of the puzzle that might rewrite history itself. Just when we thought the pyramids had given up all their secrets, modern technology peeled back another layer of the mystery. In 2017, scientists using muon radiography, a technique that essentially creates an X-ray of the pyramid using cosmic rays, discovered something astonishing: a hidden void deep within the Great Pyramid, stretching nearly 100 feet long. This wasn't some minor crack or erosion. It was a deliberate, empty space tucked behind the Grand Gallery, its purpose completely unknown, and it wasn't alone. Another, smaller cavity was detected near the pyramid's north face, adding fuel to the fire of speculation. What could these voids be? Storage chambers for artifacts we've yet to uncover, architectural features designed to relieve stress on the pyramid structure, or something far more intriguing, perhaps even remnants of a construction technique lost to time. The frustrating truth is, we can't just tunnel through 4,500 years of history to find out. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has been cautious, prioritizing preservation over invasive exploration, but that hasn't stopped researchers from theorizing. Some suggest these spaces might hold clues to how the pyramid was built, maybe even the remnants of internal ramps or counterweight systems that could explain how those massive blocks were lifted so precisely. Then there's the more tantalizing possibility: what if these chambers weren't just structural quirks but intentional? Ancient Egyptian texts hint at hidden knowledge, sacred spaces reserved for the initiated. Could these voids be physical manifestations of those beliefs? Or consider this: the pyramid's design aligns with celestial patterns, and these hidden spaces might mirror stars or constellations important to the pyramid's spiritual function. Without physical access, we're left with tantalizing maybes, each more compelling than the last. What makes this discovery so electrifying isn't just the existence of the voids. It's the reminder that even after centuries of study, the pyramids still guard their secrets fiercely. Every technological leap, from ground-penetrating radar to particle physics, reveals new questions instead of answers, and that's the heart of the mystery: not just what we've found, but what we haven't. These hidden chambers are like whispers in a language we've forgotten, urging us to keep searching, to keep questioning. Because if a structure this studied, this iconic, can still surprise us, what else might be waiting beneath the sands? High above the barren plains of southern Peru, etched into the earth with almost surgical precision, lies one of archaeology's most bewildering masterpieces, the Nazca Lines. Imagine standing on the ground and seeing nothing but reddish-brown pebbles stretching to the horizon. Then, as you ascend into the sky, the desert floor transforms. Colossal figures emerge: a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with legs coiled as if ready to spring, a whale frozen mid-swim across this vast, open canvas. These aren't just sketches. Some stretch over 1,200 feet, their lines so straight and curves so fluid that they defy belief for a culture that supposedly crafted them between 2,000 and 1,500 years ago. The how is almost as puzzling as the why. The Nazca people created these geoglyphs by removing the top layer of iron oxide-coated pebbles, revealing lighter sediment beneath. But here's the twist: they did it without the advantage of flight. Every spiral, every trapezoid, every intricate animal figure was designed at ground level, yet proportioned perfectly to be visible only from the air. How did they achieve such accuracy over miles of terrain without modern tools or aerial perspective? Some researchers suggest simple surveying techniques using stakes and ropes, while others argue the line's mathematical precision hints at knowledge we've underestimated. Then there's the purpose. Were these sprawling designs ancient astronomical calendars aligning with solstices or constellations? A handful of lines do point to celestial events, but most resist easy categorization. Another theory paints them as sacred pathways, walked during rituals to invoke rain from the parched skies. The Nazca lived in one of the driest places on Earth, and the desperation for water is etched into their art literally. Many glyphs lead to water sources or depict creatures tied to fertility. But why create art so massive it can't be fully appreciated without flight? Enter the controversy. A few fringe theorists propose the lines were landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors, though mainstream archaeologists dismiss this as fantasy. More plausible but no less fascinating is the idea that the Nazca saw their gods in the sky and crafted these geoglyphs as offerings meant to be seen from above. Whatever the truth, the Nazca Lines endure as a silent dialogue between earth and sky, a riddle wrapped in dust and time, and the most haunting part. We might never know for certain. The Nazca left no written records, only these sprawling, cryptic messages in the sand waiting, even now, for someone to decipher their meaning. The moment you bring up the Nazca Lines in conversation, someone will inevitably mention aliens. This isn't just casual speculation, it's a theory that's been fiercely argued since the late 1960s, when Swiss author Erich von Däniken thrust it into the spotlight. In his book Chariots of the Gods, von Däniken proposed that the Nazca Lines were landing strips for ancient extraterrestrial visitors, their enormous scale and precision serving as proof that humans couldn't have created them alone. The idea captured imaginations worldwide, transforming these desert etchings from archaeological curiosities into pillars of the ancient astronaut hypothesis. But let's dissect this claim under the harshest light. Von Däniken's argument hinges on two assumptions. First, that the Nazca people lacked the technology to create such precise designs, and second, that the line's sheer size implies an aerial viewpoint, presumably for beings who could fly. Archaeologists, however, have dismantled both points. Experiments have shown that with simple tools like wooden stakes and ropes, small teams could replicate the line's geometric perfection. As for the aerial perspective, the Nazca didn't need to see their work from above. They could have scaled down designs using grids, then enlarged them proportionally across the desert, a technique evidenced by surviving scaled-down sketches found on pottery. The backlash from the scientific community was swift and thorough. Critics accused von Däniken of cultural condescension, dismissing the ingenuity of indigenous people in favor of sensationalism. Worse, his theory ignored the Nazca's own context, their intricate textiles, advanced irrigation systems, and the fact that many glyphs align with ceremonial pathways linked to water rituals. Still, the alien narrative persists, buoyed by pop culture and the human penchant for mystery. Yet here's the fascinating twist. The alien hypothesis, however flawed, accidentally did archaeology a favor. It forced researchers to re-examine the lines with rigor, leading to discoveries about their construction and purpose that might have otherwise gone unexplored. The irony, by insisting the lines were too advanced for humans, von Däniken underestimated the very species he belonged to. The Nazca didn't need extraterrestrial help. Their work stands as a testament to what humans can achieve when culture, necessity, and creativity collide. And that truth, frankly, is more extraordinary than any alien intervention. Hidden in the vaults of Yale University's Voynich Library lies a book that has defied understanding for over 5 centuries, the Voynich Manuscript. Its 240 pages are filled with looping, alien script that no one has ever decoded, accompanied by illustrations so strange they seem plucked from a fever dream. Naked women bathing in green liquid, plants that don't resemble any known species, and celestial charts mapping heavens unrecognizable to modern astronomy. Since its discovery in 1912, this enigmatic text has become the holy grail of cryptographers, linguists, and historians, all desperate to crack a code that refuses to yield. What makes the Voynich Manuscript so maddening isn't just its indecipherable language, it's the mounting evidence that it is a language. Statistical analysis of the text reveals patterns consistent with meaningful communication, not random gibberish. Words repeat in predictable ways, sentence structures follow rules, and certain characters appear only in specific positions, just like in real alphabets. Yet despite centuries of effort, including codebreakers from World War II, who'd cracked Nazi ciphers, no one has found a key. Even artificial intelligence trained on thousands of languages has hit a wall. In 2019, a team claimed their algorithm had identified Hebrew as the source, but their translation produced disjointed phrases that scholars dismissed as coincidence. Then there are the illustrations, which only deepen the mystery. Herbal sections depict plants with no known earthly counterpart. Are they encrypted references to real botany or pure fantasy? Astronomical diagrams show unfamiliar constellations, some with zodiac-like symbols that don't match any known tradition. And perhaps most bizarre, the biological section features those nude women wading through interconnected tubes of liquid, their bodies oddly elongated. Some theories suggest alchemical symbolism, others propose medieval medical theories gone wild. But without understanding the text, these images remain Rorschach tests reflecting the biases of whoever studies them. The manuscript's origin is another puzzle. Carbon dating places its vellum between 1404 and 1438, likely from northern Italy. But its author unknown. Some speculate it was the work of Roger Bacon, a 13th-century polymath, while others blame Renaissance forgers like Edward Kelly, who duped royals with magical texts. Then there's the radical notion that it's an elaborate hoax, but if so, why invest such effort into a 600-year-old prank? What keeps scholars obsessed isn't just the challenge, it's the tantalizing possibility that the Voynich holds genuine lost knowledge. Could it be a coded herbal compendium preserving forbidden medical wisdom, a heretical religious text hidden to avoid persecution, or something far stranger, like an attempt to document an encounter with the inexplicable? Every failed decryption feels like a locked door, behind which whispers the echo of a voice we're almost close enough to hear. And that's the true power of the Voynich Manuscript, not just what it says, but what it represents, the human craving to solve the unsolvable, to put words to the whispers of the past. Turn to any page in the Voynich Manuscript's herbal section, and you'll find yourself staring at plants that seem to defy nature itself. Some have leaves sprouting directly from their roots in impossible configurations, while others boast flowers with geometric precision petals arranged like intricate mandalas. These aren't just stylized drawings, they're detailed enough to suggest the artist had something specific in mind, yet nothing matches the botanical record. For years, researchers have tried to link these illustrations to real species with mixed results. A handful bear vague resemblances to known herbs, like a distorted version of sunflower or ginseng, but the majority remain stubbornly alien. Could they be encrypted references to actual plants, their features deliberately altered to hide their identities? Or are we looking at pure imagination, a medieval artist's attempt to depict plants from another world or another dimension? The mystery deepens when you consider the context. Herbal manuscripts were common in medieval Europe, often serving as medical guides. But unlike those practical texts, the Voynich's plants don't align with any known medicinal traditions. Take the notorious Voynich root, a bulbous structure with humanoid limbs. Some theorize its coded symbolism for mandrake, a plant steeped in folklore for its scream-like roots. Others argue it's a fantastical representation of an alchemical process where plants symbolize stages of transformation. Then there's the chain plant, its stems interlocking like metal links. Cryptobotanists have proposed everything from coral reef sketches misunderstood by a landlocked artist to visual metaphors for DNA centuries before its discovery. Perhaps the most compelling theory comes from historian Arthur Tucker, who in 2014 claimed several Voynich plants resemble species native to Mexico. His research pointed to illustrations matching the soap plant and the cochineal cactus, suggesting the manuscript might blend New World botany with Old World symbolism. If true, it would rewrite the book's provenance, linking it to early transatlantic explorers. But critics were quick to poke holes. Many of Tucker's matches rely on subjective interpretation, and carbon dating places the manuscript's vellum decades before Columbus's voyage. Then there's the radical idea that these plants did exist, just not in our timeline. Could the manuscript preserve knowledge of extinct species or hybrids engineered by a lost civilization? It's a stretch, but not impossible. After all, medieval manuscripts often depicted animals like unicorns, blending myth with real creatures like rhinos. Maybe the Voynich's flora represents a similar blurring of observation and legend. Or maybe, just maybe, the answer is simpler. What if these plants were never meant to be literal at all, but symbolic keys to a larger puzzle? Their twisting roots and impossible blooms might be a language in themselves, a visual cipher waiting for the right pair of eyes to decode. Until then, they remain as elusive as the text that surrounds them, a garden of mysteries growing wild in the margins of history. In the murky depths of the Aegean Sea, off the coast of a tiny Greek island called Antikythera, divers made a discovery in 1901 that would shatter our understanding of ancient technology. What they pulled from the wreckage of a 2,000-year-old Roman ship wasn't just another artifact, it was a corroded, fragmented lump of bronze that, when carefully reconstructed, revealed a maze of interlocking gears so precise it could only be described as the world's first analog computer. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device so advanced it shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years. At first glance, the mechanism resembles a clockwork puzzle box, its gears arranged in concentric circles. But this was no timepiece. Scholars painstakingly pieced together its function using high-resolution X-rays and three-dimensional modeling, revealing a machine capable of predicting solar eclipses, tracking the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, and even modeling the irregular motions of the moon with astonishing accuracy. The Greeks called this theories of the heavenly things, and the mechanism brought their celestial mathematics to life, turning abstract calculations into tangible, moving parts. The real shock isn't just what it did, it's how it was built. The Antikythera Mechanism contains at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut at precise angles to account for celestial irregularities. One gear, known as the subtle gear, even corrected for the moon's elliptical orbit, a concept not formally documented until the 17th century by Johannes Kepler. This level of mechanical sophistication rivals that of 18th century Swiss watches, yet it was crafted in a world where most technology still relied on levers and pulleys. So how did the Greeks achieve this leap, and why was such groundbreaking knowledge lost? One theory points to the workshops of Rhodes, where legendary inventors like Posidonius and Hipparchus pushed the boundaries of astronomy and engineering. Perhaps the mechanism was a one-of-a-kind prototype, its secrets known only to a handful of scholars. When Rome conquered Greece, the focus shifted from scientific inquiry to military innovation, and the delicate art of gearwork might have faded into obscurity. Another possibility is darker. What if the mechanism's technology was deliberately suppressed? Ancient texts mention devices that could show the heavens, but these were often linked to mysticism or heresy. In an era when knowledge was power, some truths might have been too dangerous to preserve. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: how much genius has been erased by time? Its very existence hints at a lineage of lost inventions, a shadow history of technology that didn't survive wars, fires, or the slow decay of parchment. And here's the most haunting part: we only know about this device because a single ship sank, preserving it in the ocean's embrace. How many other marvels vanished without a trace? The mechanism isn't just a relic, it's a whisper from the past, urging us to reconsider what ancient civilizations were truly capable of, and what we might still rediscover. For decades, the Antikythera Mechanism was little more than a corroded enigma, until modern technology stepped in to resurrect its secrets. Using high-resolution X-ray tomography and three-dimensional reconstructions, scientists like Michael Wright and the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project painstakingly peeled back layers of calcified grime to reveal the device's inner workings. What emerged was nothing short of a mechanical cosmos, a labyrinth of gears mirroring the motions of the heavens. One pivotal breakthrough came when researchers deciphered inscriptions on the mechanism's housing, which functioned like an ancient user manual, explaining how to read its dials tracking the sun, moon, and 5 known planets. The real revelation, though, wasn't just confirming the mechanism's purpose, it was how it achieved such precision. Reconstructions showed geared trains with teeth cut to exact ratios, accounting for celestial quirks like the moon's elliptical orbit. One gear with 127 teeth modeled the moon's 19-year metonic cycle with staggering accuracy. To test these findings, teams built physical replicas using period-appropriate tools. The results were undeniable. Bronze Age craftsmen, armed with nothing more than hand tools and geometric intuition, could have produced this masterpiece. Yet the implications are dizzying. If this device existed, what else might have been lost? Consider the accounts of ancient inventors like Archimedes, whose planetarium allegedly mimicked celestial motions so vividly it brought the heavens indoors. Cicero described a device recently built by our friend Posidonius that mirrored the Antikythera's functions. These weren't isolated marvels, they hint at a tradition of mechanical astronomy that flourished briefly, then vanished. The mechanism's survival is a fluke preserved by seawater where countless others crumbled to dust in libraries or workshops. This raises an unsettling question: how many other leaps of genius have been erased by time? The Antikythera forces us to confront the fragile nature of knowledge. Its very existence suggests that history isn't a straight line from primitive to advanced, but a maze of dead ends and forgotten peaks. Every gear, every inscription whispers that our ancestors' brilliance might have burned brighter and been extinguished sooner than we ever imagined, and that's the true legacy of the Antikythera mechanism. Not just a solved puzzle, but a door cracked open to a world of lost wonders we're only beginning to glimpse. Deep in the jungles of Central America, where towering pyramids peek through the canopy like stone ghosts, lies one of history's most haunting questions: what happened to the Maya? At the height of their power, between 250 and 900 AD, their civilization was a beacon of sophistication. Master mathematicians who invented the concept of zero, architects who built cities without the wheel, and astronomers who tracked Venus's orbit with pinpoint accuracy. Then, seemingly overnight, their great city-states emptied. Palenque, Tikal, Kapon, all abandoned to the vines and the silence. No invasion, no cataclysm left a clear culprit. Just empty plazas and hieroglyphs that stop mid-sentence, as if the scribes simply put down their pens and walked away. Theories abound, but none satisfy completely. Take the drought hypothesis. Sediment cores from nearby lakes reveal a series of brutal dry spells between 800 and 1000 AD, coinciding with the collapse. A civilization dependent on maize would have been devastated, but here's the catch. Not all cities fell at once. Some in the north, like Chichen Itza, thrived for centuries longer. If drought alone was the killer, why the staggered demise? Then there's warfare. Glyphs depict kings captured, dynasties toppled, yet the scale was likely local skirmishes, not empire-wide annihilation. The real clue might lie in the aftermath. No evidence of mass graves, no signs of hurried flight, just a slow unraveling, as if the social contract itself had frayed. Politics offers another lens. Maya society revolved around divine kings, rulers who claimed to negotiate with gods for rain and harvests. When droughts came and promises failed, faith in these leaders may have crumbled. Archaeologists find smashed stelae, monuments defaced not by invaders but by the Maya themselves. A rebellion against the elite, perhaps, but this, too, fails to explain why some cities adapted while others vanished. The most unsettling possibility: there was no single cause. Like a rope snapping strand by strand, the Maya collapse might have been death by 1,000 cuts. Drought straining resources, wars draining resilience, political fractures eroding unity. By the time Spanish chronicles recorded the empty cities, the Maya hadn't disappeared, they'd simply walked away from grandeur, returning to simpler lives in the jungle. Their descendants still thrive today, speaking Mayan languages and keeping traditions alive. The mystery, then, isn't extinction. It's why a civilization so advanced chose to abandon its own brilliance, leaving behind monuments not as tombstones but as riddles carved in stone. Walking through the ruins of Tikal today, you can almost hear the echoes of a civilization that once pulsed with life. The towering pyramids rise like silent sentinels above the jungle canopy, their stepped sides worn smooth by centuries of rain. But it's the smaller details that truly unsettle the half-finished carvings abandoned mid-chisel, the pottery shards scattered where they fell, the hieroglyphs that trail off as if the scribe was interrupted mid-thought. In the Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque, the story is the same. A royal tomb lies sealed, its occupant resting beneath a sarcophagus lid etched with celestial maps, yet outside, the city's grand plazas stand empty, as though everyone simply vanished into the green embrace of the forest. What makes these sites so haunting isn't just their scale, it's the intimacy of their abandonment. At Kapan, a stela depicts King Waxaclajun Abakayahwil in full regalia, his face turned toward the heavens. But the monument was never finished. The back remains rough, uncarved, as if the artisans dropped their tools mid-session. Nearby, a set of steps records the city's history in glyphs, culminating in a final, ominous entry. And then there was no one. No explanation, no grand finale, just silence. The artifacts left behind deepen the enigma. In Tikal's central acropolis, archaeologists found traces of a last meal maize and beans charred in cooking pots, suggesting people were present right up until the end. Yet there are no signs of violence, no mass graves to point to invasion or plague. At Palenque, a scribe's workshop was discovered with ink still dried on grinding stones and unfinished codices stacked neatly, as if waiting for a return that never came. Perhaps most telling are the deliberate acts of closure. In some buildings, doorways were carefully sealed with rubble. At Piedras Negras, a royal throne room was ritually killed, its sculptures smashed and scattered in a pattern suggesting ceremony, not chaos. These weren't people fleeing in panic, they were closing a chapter methodically and with purpose. The inscriptions offer cryptic clues. Some mention Star War events, likely conflicts between city-states, while others speak of droughts so severe they cracked the earth. One Palenque text laments, "The black cloud came and the sky fell," but none provide a definitive answer. Were these omens, metaphors, or literal disasters? The Maya left us their words, yet their meaning dissolves like mist in the jungle dawn. What lingers isn't just the mystery of why they left, but why they didn't return. These were sacred spaces, the beating hearts of their world. That no one came back to reclaim them suggests something fundamental had broken not just the land or the leadership, but the very belief that held it all together. The stones remain, whispering in a language we're still learning to understand. And with each new glyph deciphered, each artifact unearthed, we catch another fleeting glimpse of the moment a civilization chose to walk away from its own grandeur, leaving only echoes in the empty courtyards. Scattered across the jungles and river deltas of southern Costa Rica, hidden beneath centuries of soil and vegetation, lie hundreds of stone spheres so perfectly round they defy logic. Ranging from the size of a bowling ball to over 8 feet in diameter and weighing up to 16 tons, these mysterious orbs, known as the Dikwi spheres, were crafted by a vanished culture with an almost supernatural understanding of geometry. The first modern discovery came in the 1930s, when workers clearing land for banana plantations stumbled upon clusters of these spheres, some half-buried like ancient eggs waiting to hatch. But it wasn't until archaeologists began studying them that the true enigma emerged. These weren't just rocks shaped by chance. They were precision-engineered masterpieces, their surfaces smoothed to within millimeters of perfect roundness, despite being carved from hard granite without metal tools. Who made them and why? The leading theory points to the Dikwi's people, a pre-Columbian society that flourished between 800 and 1500 AD. But here's the catch: while we've found their pottery and gold work, we've uncovered no written records, no carvings, not even a single tool that explains how they achieved such perfection. Modern experiments show that creating spheres this precise would require not just skill, but an almost obsessive dedication to symmetry. Craftsmen likely hammered the granite with smaller stones, then polished it with sand and water over generations. A process so labor-intensive it suggests these spheres held profound significance. Yet their purpose remains a blank slate. Local legends add layers of intrigue. Some indigenous oral traditions claim the spheres were gifts from the god of thunder, tossed down from the mountains as markers of sacred sites. Others say they're remnants of a lost civilization's navigation system, placed in alignment with celestial patterns. A few even whisper that they're energy conduits capable of channeling unseen forces, a theory bolstered by the eerie fact that many were found grouped in geometric formations like points on an invisible grid. Then there's the puzzle of their dispersal. Many spheres were moved during the 20th century, rolled by bulldozers or looted for gardens, erasing their original context. But the few left undisturbed offer tantalizing clues. At El Silencio, the largest known sphere sits atop a raised platform, facing a mountain ridge where the sun sets in perfect alignment during equinoxes. Nearby at Batumble, 4 spheres form a straight line pointing to magnetic north. Were they astronomical calendars, territorial markers, or perhaps something more ritualistic, like physical manifestations of the Dikwi's belief in cosmic harmony? Theories collide when you consider the sphere's material. Granite isn't native to the areas where most were found. They were transported miles from quarries, an astonishing feat without wheels or pack animals. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was a statement, and that's the heart of the mystery. In a world without written records, these silent orbs are the Dikwi's loudest legacy. They refuse to fit neatly into our categories of art, tool, or relic. Each one is a riddle carved in stone, a testament to a culture that mastered the Earth's geometry but left no manual behind. The most haunting question isn't how they made them, it's why they stopped. The sphere's creators vanished long before European contact, their knowledge as lost as the tools they used. Today, the stones remain smooth and impenetrable, their secrets locked inside a perfection that outlasted the hands that shaped them. The Dikwi's people left behind more than just stone spheres. They left a cultural fingerprint as enigmatic as the orbs themselves. While we don't know what they called these artifacts, their placement suggests they were far more than decorative. At sites like Finca Sixayola and Grijalba, clusters of spheres were found arranged in triangles or straight lines, some leading to ceremonial platforms or burial sites. This deliberate positioning hints at a world, where geometry and spirituality intertwined. Were these spheres physical anchors for rituals, like portals between the earthly and the divine? Or perhaps markers of sacred boundaries, separating the realm of the living from that of ancestors or gods? The astronomical angle deepens the intrigue. At El Silencio, the massive sphere aligns with the sunset during equinoxes, casting long shadows that intersect with nearby mounds in precise patterns. Similar alignments appear at Batumble, where spheres point toward celestial events like solstices. This isn't mere coincidence. The Dikwi's, like many Mesoamerican cultures, likely tracked the heavens to guide agricultural cycles or religious ceremonies. But here's the twist. Unlike the Maya or Aztecs, the Dikwi's left no codices or stelae explaining their cosmology. The spheres themselves are their only testament, silent witnesses to a lost celestial language. Then there's the social dimension. The largest spheres are often found near elite residences or communal gathering spaces, suggesting they symbolized power or unity. Imagine a chief standing beside a towering orb during ceremonies, its flawless surface reflecting torchlight, a tangible manifestation of authority carved from the earth itself. Yet the absence of hieroglyphs or carvings makes their message elusive. Were they status symbols, commemorative monuments, or even communal projects with entire villages laboring together to create objects of shared pride? The most haunting theory emerges from recent excavations at the Delta del Diquis. Archaeologists uncovered shattered spheres deliberately broken and buried in circular pits, their fragments arranged like offerings. This ritual destruction mirrors practices seen in other cultures, where sacred objects were killed to release their spiritual essence. If true, the spheres weren't just artifacts, they were living entities in the Diquis cosmology, vessels for forces beyond our understanding. What lingers isn't just the mystery of their purpose, but the silence surrounding their makers. The Diquis thrived for centuries, then vanished, their voices erased by time. The spheres endure as their only epitaph, a language without a key. Each perfect curve, each alignment, whispers of a people who mapped their universe in stone and took its meaning with them. Buried beneath the dust of a 2,000-year-old Parthian village near Baghdad lies an artifact that shouldn't exist, a clay jar no larger than a fist, housing a copper cylinder and an iron rod sealed with asphalt. Discovered in 1936, this unassuming object, now known as the Baghdad Battery, has ignited decades of debate. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or wine, it produces a measurable electric current. The implications are staggering. Did an ancient civilization stumble upon electrochemistry centuries before Alessandro Volta's official invention of the battery in 1800? The electroplating theory holds the most weight. Artisans of the Parthian and later Sasanian empires were renowned for their intricate gold and silver work, often gilded with techniques that baffled historians. Some pieces show traces of extremely thin, uniform gold layers, an effect difficult to achieve without electrochemical assistance. Replicas of the Baghdad Battery have successfully electroplated small objects, lending credibility to the idea that these jars were primitive power sources. But here's the catch: no wires, no connected artifacts, no documentation. If these were tools, why is there no evidence of their use beyond this handful of jars? Then there's the ritual angle. The asphalt seal, far from being a practical closure, might have held symbolic significance. Mesopotamian cultures used bitumen in religious ceremonies for its purported purifying properties. The jars were found alongside votive figures and amulets, suggesting a sacred context. Could the mild electric shock have been part of mystical experiences? Ancient texts describe tingling gods and rituals involving divine sparks. Were priests using these devices to conjure seemingly supernatural phenomena? Skeptics counter that the jars could have held scrolls, with the iron and copper acting as protective casings. The acidic residue perhaps decomposed papyrus. Yet this doesn't explain why such care was taken to insulate the metals, a feature unnecessary for storage but critical for generating current. What makes the Baghdad Battery so compelling isn't just the question of its purpose, it's the unsettling possibility that knowledge can be lost and rediscovered in cycles. These jars whisper of an alternate history where electricity wasn't discovered, but momentarily grasped and then forgotten. Whether tool or talisman, their very existence forces us to wonder how many other flashes of genius have flickered out in the darkness of time. Replicating the Baghdad Battery might seem like a straightforward task until you consider the precision required. Modern scientists, using exact materials and techniques available to the Parthians, have demonstrated that these jars can indeed produce between 1 and 2 volts of electricity when filled with acidic solutions like grape juice or vinegar. That's enough to electroplate small objects or even induce a mild tingling sensation, hardly enough to power a city, but potentially transformative for artisans or priests working on intricate crafts or rituals. In one experiment, a reconstructed battery coated a silver ring with gold in under 2 hours, mirroring the gilding techniques found on Parthian artifacts. The evidence seems compelling, but here's where things get murky. If these were functional tools, why have we found so few of them? only a dozen such jars have been unearthed, scattered across centuries and sites, with no workshop remnants or instructions to suggest systematic use. The counterarguments raise valid questions. Some researchers point out that acidic residue inside the jars could simply be from decomposed organic storage materials. Imagine a vessel once holding vinegar now misinterpreted as a power source. And the absence of wires or connectors is troubling. Without a complete circuit, how would ancient users have harnessed the current? Yet even skeptics admit the design is suspiciously efficient for accidental electrochemistry. The copper and iron aren't just thrown together, they're carefully insulated with asphalt, a deliberate choice that minimizes energy loss. This isn't a storage jar with incidental metals. It's a configuration optimized for generating electricity. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from a paradox. The very civilizations that might have used these devices left behind no explicit records of electrical knowledge. No diagrams, no treatises on the power of sour wine. But consider this: what if the knowledge was guarded, reserved for elite artisans or temple initiates? The ancient world was full of trade secrets, from Damascus steel to Roman concrete. If the Baghdad battery was a specialized tool, its creators might have seen no need to write it down, trusting instead to oral tradition. And when those traditions faded, so did the understanding of what these jars could do. The broader implications send shivers down the spine. If one culture stumbled upon electrochemistry, who's to say others didn't as well? Egyptian wall carvings show figures holding bulb-like objects, which some interpret as primitive light sources. The Dendera light hypothesis remains controversial, but it underscores a haunting possibility. That electricity might have been discovered, lost, and rediscovered multiple times across millennia. The Baghdad battery stands as a quiet challenge to our linear view of progress, proof that innovation isn't always a straight line, but sometimes a flickering flame, glimpsed briefly before vanishing into the dark. Whether tool, toy, or sacred object, its very existence whispers that the past might hold wonders we're only beginning to imagine. Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias give us the first and only detailed account of Atlantis, a powerful island nation swallowed by the sea in a single cataclysmic day and night. According to the ancient philosopher, this wasn't just any kingdom. Atlantis boasted concentric rings of land and water, towering statues of gold, and a civilization so advanced it made Athens look primitive. But here's the twist. Plato insists this story came to him through Egyptian priests who claimed it had been preserved for 9,000 years. Was he recording a genuine lost history, spinning an elaborate allegory about hubris, or simply inventing a cautionary tale to serve his philosophical ideals? The debate has raged for millennia, and the theories are as vast as the ocean itself. Start with the Mediterranean hypothesis. Scholars examining Plato's text note his description of Atlantis lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar. This places it squarely in the Atlantic, but some argue Plato might have garbled the location. One compelling candidate is the island of Santorini, where the Minoan civilization thrived until a volcanic eruption around 1600 BC. Obliterated its ports. The Minoans were advanced with multi-story palaces and plumbing, and their sudden collapse aligns with Plato's timeline, if you shave off a few extra millennia. Could the 9,000 years have been a transcription error, turning 900 into 9,000? Then there's the Antarctica theory, a favorite among fringe researchers. Proponents point to ancient maps like the Piri Rise, which seem to depict Antarctica's coastline free of ice, a geographical impossibility unless the map was based on pre-glacial knowledge. Could Atlantis have been a temperate continent before shifting tectonic plates dragged it southward and encased it in ice? It's a romantic idea, but geologists counter that Antarctica's landmass has been frozen for millions of years, long before any human civilization could have existed there. And what if Atlantis was never a physical place at all? Many academics argue Plato crafted the story as pure allegory, a morality play about the dangers of imperial overreach. In Krishna's, Atlantis is portrayed as a once virtuous society corrupted by greed, its downfall engineered by the gods as punishment. This mirrors themes in Plato's other works where ideal societies crumble under human frailty. The elaborate details, rings of water, divine wrath might have been narrative flourishes, not historical reporting. Yet the most tantalizing possibility is that Atlantis represents a fractured memory of multiple lost civilizations. Cataclysmic floods and submerged cities aren't unique to Plato. From the biblical deluge to Mesopotamian flood myths, cultures worldwide share stories of advanced societies wiped out by water. Could these be echoes of real events like the flooding of Doggerland in the North Sea or the sinking of India's legendary city of Dwarka? Atlantis might be a composite, a myth stitched together from half-remembered disasters. The search for Atlantis says as much about us as it does about Plato. Every generation projects its anxieties and aspirations onto the story, whether it's Victorian explorers dreaming of utopia or modern conspiracy theorists hunting for hidden technology. The real power of Atlantis isn't in its coordinates, but in its enduring grip on our imagination. A lost world just out of reach, promising answers to questions we've been asking since the dawn of time. Who were we? And what, if anything, might remain of us when we're gone? The volcanic eruption that obliterated Santorini around 1600 BC wasn't just another natural disaster, it was an earth-shattering event that may have reshaped history itself. When the island's volcano exploded with the force of multiple atomic bombs, it sent shockwaves across the Mediterranean, triggering tsunamis that crushed coastal cities and blanketed the region in suffocating ash. Among the casualties was the thriving Minoan civilization on nearby Crete, a culture so advanced they built multi-story palaces with running water and vibrant frescoes celebrating maritime life. The parallels to Plato's Atlantis are striking, a sophisticated island nation suddenly swallowed by the sea. Check, a catastrophic event involving fire and water. Double check, even Plato's description of Atlantis' circular city with concentric rings eerily mirrors Santorini's caldera, the massive volcanic crater that now forms the island's crescent-shaped harbor. Digging deeper into the geology only strengthens the connection. Core samples from the Aegean Sea reveal ash layers matching Santorini's eruption date, while archaeological sites on Crete show sudden destruction consistent with tsunami damage. At Akrotiri, a Minoan settlement on Santorini itself, excavations uncovered a city frozen in time, buildings preserved under volcanic pumice, their vivid wall paintings still intact. There's no evidence of panic or bodies, suggesting the inhabitants had warning and evacuated. Could this orderly abandonment have morphed into legend as Atlantis's disappearance without a trace? The timeline fits if we assume Plato's 9,000 years was a translation error. Swap 900 or even 9,000 months, and the dates align almost perfectly with the Minoan collapse. Yet skeptics point to glaring inconsistencies. Plato's Atlantis was west of Gibraltar, not in the Aegean. Its destruction involved divine punishment, not just geology. And while the Minoans were advanced, they weren't the godlike superpower Plato described. But legends evolve. Over centuries, Egyptian priests retelling the story might have relocated Atlantis to a more mythic distance, embellishing its grandeur. After all, Santorini's eruption was so colossal, its effects reached Egypt recorded as storms in a cloudless sky, when ash blotted out the sun. What started as a real disaster could have transformed into a cautionary tale about the wrath of nature or the gods. The most compelling detail isn't in the ruins but in the silence. After the eruption, Minoan trade networks collapsed overnight, their vibrant art ceased. No more grand palaces were built. To civilizations like Egypt, it might have seemed like an entire people had vanished beneath the waves. Atlantis wasn't just a place, it was a warning about the fragility of even the mightiest societies. And whether Plato's story was inspired by Santorini or not, the lesson remains: the sea gives and the sea takes away. The Minoans knew it. Perhaps that's why their legacy, like Atlantis, refuses to sink beneath the tides of time. Standing on the windswept coast of Brittany, France, you'll find yourself surrounded by an army of silent sentinels, row upon row of ancient megaliths stretching as far as the eye can see. These are the Karnak stones, a sprawling network of over 3,000 standing stones, arranged in eerily precise lines that march across the landscape like soldiers frozen mid-parade. Dating back to roughly 4,500 B.C., these weathered monoliths range from knee-high markers to towering columns weighing dozens of tons. But what chills the spine isn't just their scale, it's the mystery of their arrangement. Unlike the haphazard dolmens and stone circles found elsewhere, the Karnak alignments form geometric patterns so deliberate they seem to whisper of lost knowledge. The most compelling theory points to the stars. Several of the major alignments, like the famous Menec and Camario rows, orient toward key celestial events. At sunrise during the summer solstice, the stones cast elongated shadows that converge in precise angles, creating stark geometric patterns across the terrain. Meanwhile, the Grand Menhir Brisset, now fallen but once the tallest standing stone in Europe, aligns with the moon's major standstill, an 18.6-year lunar cycle few ancient cultures tracked. Could these have been Neolithic observatories where priest astronomers marked the heavens to predict seasons or eclipses? The stone's arrangement mirrors other megalithic sites like Stonehenge, hinting at a shared celestial language across prehistoric Europe. Yet the Karnak stones guard their secrets more fiercely than most. Unlike Egypt's pyramids or Mesopotamia's ziggurats, these megaliths were erected by a people who left no written records, no carvings, not even a fragment of pottery to explain their purpose. Archaeologists classify them as part of the Armorican culture, but that's just a placeholder, a label for a civilization whose name, beliefs, and daily life remain utterly unknown. The stones themselves are the only testimony, and they speak in riddles. Local folklore adds layers of intrigue. Medieval legends claimed the stones were Roman soldiers petrified by the wizard Merlin, while Breton tales spoke of them as markers for buried treasure or portals to the otherworld. Some modern dowsers insist the megaliths channel telluric energy, pointing to anomalies in magnetic fields around certain stones. But science offers a humbler explanation. Many alignments follow the region's natural geological faults, suggesting the builders may have incorporated existing landmarks into their design. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't how they built them, but why they stopped. Around 2500 B.C., the Karnak culture vanished, leaving their megaliths unfinished. At Lamanio, a massive stone dubbed the Giant stands half-carved from the bedrock, as if the artisans walked away mid-task. Did climate shifts force them to abandon the site? Did new beliefs render the old ways obsolete? Or was it something more profound, a cultural forgetting where the meaning of the stones faded even for their descendants? Today, the alignments endure as both a monument and a mirror. They reflect our own longing to decode the past, to hear the voices of those who came before. Every solstice, when the light dances between the stones just so, it's hard not to feel the weight of that silence, the echo of a people who reshaped the earth to mark the sky, then vanished without leaving a single word to tell us why. Among the whispering pines and salt-kissed winds of Brittany, local legends breathe life into the Karnak stones with stories far older than history books. One enduring tale claims these silent monoliths were once Roman legionnaires, marching in perfect formation until the wizard Merlin, yes, the very same from Arthurian legend, raised his staff and turned them to stone in an instant. Imagine standing among those rows at dusk, the stones catching the fading light like petrified soldiers still frozen in their final moments. The story carries the weight of medieval Europe's fascination with Merlin's power, but also something deeper, an attempt to explain the unexplainable, to give human hands and motives to a mystery that predates even the Romans by millennia. Then there's the legend of Saint Cornley, Brittany's patron saint of cattle. Pursued by an army, Cornley, so the story goes, trapped his pursuers among the stones, where they were transformed into granite as punishment for their sins. The tale is often told with a wink, as locals still joke that the stones multiply at night when no one's watching. But beneath the folklore lies a cultural truth. These megaliths have always been more than rocks to the people who lived among them. They were boundary markers, spiritual guardians, even living entities with names like the Fairy Stone or the Devil's Teeth. More haunting are the whispered accounts of the Corrigans, Breton fairies said to dance among the alignments under moonlight. Villagers once left offerings of milk or bread at the base of certain stones, fearing the wrath of these capricious spirits. Some older residents still recount stories of travelers who vanished after mocking the megaliths, only to reappear decades later, convinced mere minutes had passed, a clear echo of the otherworld myths that permeate Celtic lore. The sheer variety of these tales reveals something profound. The Karnak stones have served as a blank canvas for human imagination across ages. To medieval peasants, they were proof of Merlin's magic. To Iron Age Celts, perhaps gateways to the divine. Even today, dowsers claim to feel energy pulsing through the stones, while archaeologists meticulously map their celestial alignments. What unites all these interpretations is the unshakable sense that these stones mean something, that their patterns and placements hold a message we've yet to fully decipher. And perhaps that's their true power, not in answering our questions, but in keeping them alive across generations, each era projecting its own hopes, fears, and wonders onto the granite. The next time you walk between these rows, running your hand over lichen-crusted surfaces worn smooth by centuries of rain, listen closely. You might just hear the echo of 1,000 stories, some whispered, some shouted, all trying to solve the same ancient riddle. And who's to say the truth isn't hidden among them? After all, legends often grow where history leaves gaps. In the scorching deserts of China's Xinjiang region, where the wind carves patterns into the dunes, archaeologists made a discovery that rewrote history. An entire cemetery of mummies with striking blonde hair, high cheekbones, and European features, perfectly preserved by the arid climate for over 4,000 years. These are the Tarim mummies, and their existence flips our understanding of ancient migration on its head. Found dressed in brightly colored woolens, their faces still cradled by intricate felt masks, they look like they could have walked straight out of Bronze Age Scandinavia rather than the heart of Central Asia. The contrast is jarring. Celtic-style plaids and leather boots buried beneath Chinese soil, millennia before the Silk Road connected these distant cultures. How did they get there? Genetic testing reveals the mummies belonged to a group called the Tocharians, descendants of ancient Indo-Europeans who migrated eastward from the steppes of modern-day Ukraine or southern Russia. Their mitochondrial DNA matches lineages found in modern Western Europeans, yet here they were, thriving in the Tarim Basin around 2000 BC, speaking a language closer to Celtic or Germanic than anything Asian. The mystery isn't just their presence, it's how they lived. Unlike the nomadic tribes roaming the steppes at the time, these people were settled agriculturalists, cultivating wheat and millet in oases, weaving textiles with techniques identical to those found in alpine Europe, and even using medicinal herbs like ephedra, a plant later revered in Chinese medicine. The cultural implications are staggering. Artifacts buried with the mummies include remnants of cheese, making the oldest known evidence of dairy fermentation in East Asia, and wooden carvings of horses that echo styles from the Black Sea region. One female mummy, dubbed the Beauty of Lulan, wears a red twill tunic and goatskin leggings that wouldn't look out of place in Bronze Age Denmark. This wasn't a fleeting contact, it was a full-blown transplant of Western culture onto the edge of what would become China. But here's the twist: despite their foreign roots, the Tarim people didn't remain isolated. Over centuries, their DNA shows gradual mixing with neighboring populations, their distinctive features blending into the broader tapestry of Xinjiang's ethnic groups. By the time written records appear, their language, Tocharian, was already a linguistic island, a dying whisper of their origins. Today, their legacy lingers in the faces of some Aiker people, where occasional blue eyes or light hair hint at this ancient connection. The real enigma isn't how they traveled so far, it's why. Were they driven by climate shifts on the steppe, following herds, or part of a broader, forgotten network of Bronze Age explorers who mapped the world long before history bothered to take notes? The Tarim mummies refuse to give easy answers. They simply lie in their museum cases, their flaxen hair still bright under the glass, staring back at us with the quiet defiance of those who know their story is far stranger than we've dared to imagine. The genetic story of the Tarim mummies reads like a detective novel, with each DNA sample rewriting chapters of human migration we thought were settled. In 2021, groundbreaking genome sequencing revealed these fair-haired people weren't just passing travelers. They were deeply rooted in the Tarim Basin for generations, yet their ancestry traced back to the ancient North Eurasians, a population that once roamed Siberia and later gave rise to both Europeans and Native Americans. This wasn't a mere trickle of gene flow. It was a direct lineage stretching across thousands of miles and years, frozen in time by the desert's dry embrace. What stuns researchers isn't just their origin, it's how little they mixed with neighboring groups during their early centuries in the region. Unlike other Indo-European migrants who blended with local populations, the Tarim mummies' genomes show almost no East Asian ancestry until much later periods. They were a genetic island, preserving their Western steppe heritage in the heart of Asia, while cultivating millet and herding sheep like their Chinese neighbors. Their very existence forces us to redraw the map of Bronze Age interactions, proving that long before the Silk Road, threads of culture and biology wove across continents in ways we're only beginning to trace. The implications ripple through Chinese history. Traditional narratives paint ancient Xinjiang as culturally isolated until Han Dynasty expansions, but the mummies tell a different story. One particularly striking find, a finely woven tartan skirt buried with a woman near church and mirrors textile patterns from Celtic burials in Austria. How did this weaving tradition cross 8,000 kilometers without leaving traces along the way? The answer might lie in the overlooked networks of the Afanasivo culture, Siberian herders whose migrations seeded Tocharian genes across the Tarim. Yet the most tantalizing clue comes from their language. Manuscripts discovered in nearby oases centuries later record Tocharian, an Indo-European tongue startlingly close to ancient Germanic and Celtic. Imagine the dissonance, European-sounding words like "count" meaning 100, spoken in Buddhist monasteries along the Silk Road, preserved in texts beside Chinese and Sanskrit. These linguistic ghosts hint at a cultural endurance that defies geography, proof that the mummies' descendants didn't vanish but adapted, their legacy echoing in places historians never thought to listen. The real mystery isn't why they came, but how they thrived in such a harsh land. Recent pollen studies suggest the Tarim Basin was far lusher 4,000 years ago, dotted with oases fed by glacial rivers. The mummies' felt hats and woolen cloaks speak to a mastery of textiles suited for fluctuating climates, while preserved baskets still hold grains of wheat and millet, crops they likely introduced to the region. These weren't lost wanderers, they were pioneers carving out a home where no one expected them to be. As their DNA quietly reshapes textbooks, the mummies pose a humbling question. How many other threads of human history remain tangled beneath the sands? For every genome sequenced, a dozen stories wait to be unearthed, stories of resilience, connection, and the quiet defiance of people who refuse to fit neatly into the borders we draw for them. The Tarim mummies, with their piercing stares and woven plaid, remind us that identity has always been more fluid than stone and far more enduring. high above the modern rooftops of Cusco, Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman looms with a silent, almost arrogant confidence. Its walls, built from massive irregular blocks of limestone and andesite, fit together so tightly that not even a razor blade can slip between them. These stones aren't just stacked, they're woven, their jagged edges interlocking like puzzle pieces carved by giants. Some blocks weigh over 120 tons, yet they've withstood earthquakes that flattened Spanish colonial buildings below. How did the Inca, working without mortar, iron tools, or even the wheel, achieve such precision? The answer might rewrite everything we think we know about ancient engineering. Start with the earthquake resistance. Unlike rigid, straight-walled constructions, Sacsayhuaman's zigzagging polygonal masonry actually thrives under seismic stress. When tremors hit, the stones shift slightly, then settle back into place, their irregular shapes acting like a 3D shock absorber. Modern engineers call this a seismic construction, and it's a technique we've only recently mastered with flexible joints and alloys. For the Inca, it was instinctual. They built as if they understood the land's restless nature, crafting walls that danced with the earth rather than fought against it. But here's the real head-scratcher. How did they shape these colossal blocks with nothing harder than bronze and stone tools? That's where the theories turn wild. Some researchers point to the stone softening legends, Inca oral traditions describing a plant extract that could temporarily liquefy rock, allowing artisans to mold it like clay. Spanish chroniclers wrote of seeing stones that appeared melted, and similar myths exist across South America. Chemists have even identified local plants like jocha that, when mixed with organic compounds, can slightly soften certain minerals. But could this explain the micrometer-perfect seams? Skeptics argue that no botanical solution would account for the sheer variety of rock types used, each requiring different softening agents. Then there's the advanced tools camp. Microscopic analysis of the stone surfaces reveals striations suggesting some form of abrasive polishing, possibly using quartz sand or harder stones dragged under pressure. But even this doesn't fully explain the concave cuts and knobs found on certain blocks, features that would require tools far beyond simple hammers and chisels. One radical hypothesis proposes the Inca inherited knowledge from a lost civilization, perhaps the same builders behind Puma Punku's geometric marvels in Bolivia. Others suggest they used templates or string guides to achieve such symmetry, though no such tools have ever been found, the most haunting possibility. We're missing a fundamental piece of Inca technology. Their quipus, knotted strings used for record-keeping, prove they could encode complex data without writing. What if their masonry, too, relied on a system we've yet to decipher? The stones themselves hold clues. Some feature small protrusions like handles that might have been used for placement, while others have channels that could have guided ropes or levers. Yet without blueprints or first-hand accounts, we're left reverse engineering genius from silence. Sacsayhuaman's walls don't just defy time, they defy our assumptions. Every perfectly angled joint, every earthquake-surviving curve, whispers that the Inca knew something we're still struggling to grasp. Whether it was botanical chemistry, forgotten physics, or simply an artisan tradition honed over generations, one thing's clear: this wasn't just construction. It was conversation, a dialogue between human hands and the living stone, written in a language we've only begun to translate. The Spanish conquistadors who first laid eyes on Sacsayhuaman's walls in the 16th century were so awestruck, they convinced themselves only demons or giants could have built it. Their chronicles speak of stones so large and so precisely fitted that it seemed they must have been poured into place rather than carved. But hidden within those colonial accounts are tantalizing hints of forgotten techniques, whispers of knowledge lost in the chaos of conquest. One missionary, Father Bernabe Cobo, recorded an Inca legend about the god Viracocha, who allegedly taught mortals how to soften stone using a magical herb. Another account describes laborers using mirrors to focus sunlight, melting rock like wax. These stories sound like myth until you realize similar traditions exist across the Andes. Take the Seikosca technique, still practiced by some Quechua stonemasons today. They claim certain plants, when crushed and mixed with organic acids, create a paste that can temporarily weaken stone surfaces, making them easier to shape. Modern experiments back this up. Researchers found that sap from the jocha plant, combined with fermented urine, can slightly dissolve silica bonds in andesite, the same rock used at Sacsayhuaman. Could the Inca have scaled this process, creating a botanical, softening agent to mold those massive blocks? Skeptics argue no known plant could dissolve stone completely, but what if the goal wasn't liquefaction, just enough surface alteration to allow precise carving with bronze tools? Then there's the Spanish mention of sun mirrors. At the nearby Temple of the Sun, conquistadors described sheets of polished gold reflecting sunlight with such intensity they could light ceremonial fires. Some researchers speculate these weren't just religious objects, but tools-focused beams might have heated specific points on stone surfaces, causing thermal fractures that allowed clean breaks along desired lines. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Ancient Greek engineers used burning mirrors to shape marble, and the Incas' goldsmithing skills were unparalleled. But perhaps the most compelling clues lie in unfinished quarries. At Rumacolca, abandoned stone blocks bear peculiar markings, shallow grooves, and drilled holes in geometric patterns. Some archaeologists believe these were part of a score and snap technique, where workers carved precise channels, then inserted wooden wedges soaked in water. As the wood expanded, it created controlled fractures along the grooves, splitting massive stones with surgical accuracy. Similar methods were used in ancient Egypt and Japan, proving the concept works, yet somehow the Inca achieved even tighter fits. The tragedy is that these techniques likely died with the empire. The Spanish dismantled Sacsayhuaman's upper tiers to build their own churches, and indigenous stonemasons were forced into European-style labor. Within generations, knowledge passed down through oral tradition may have faded into legend. Today, Quechua elders still speak of Yanantin, the philosophy of balancing opposites, reflected in how each stone's imperfections complement its neighbor. That mindset might be the real secret behind Inca masonry. Not lost technology, but a lost way of seeing the world, where stone wasn't conquered but conversed with. Standing before those walls now, you can almost feel the ghost of that dialogue. The patient tap of bronze chisels, the murmur of measurements passed between generations, the quiet satisfaction of a block settling into its destined place. The stones remain, but the voices that shaped them are silent, leaving us to piece together their wisdom from fragments both literal and imagined. Housed in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, the Piri Reis map of 1513 isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a cartographic time bomb. Drawn on gazelle skin by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this fragment of a larger world map depicts coastlines with eerie precision, from the western shores of Africa to the eastern edge of South America. But the real shock lies in its lower edge, a landmass labeled Antarctica, rendered with haunting accuracy and conspicuously free of ice. Here's the problem. Antarctica's coastline was officially discovered in 1820, and its glacial cap has been intact for millions of years. So how did a 16th century mapmaker sketch terrain no human eye had seen, or should have been able to see since the age of the dinosaurs? Dive into the details and the anomalies multiply. The map's depiction of Queen Maud Land, a region of Antarctica, aligns uncannily with subglacial topography revealed by modern seismic surveys. Mountain ranges and river valleys on Piri Reis's version mirror what we now know lies beneath miles of ice, features invisible unless Antarctica was ice-free when surveyed. Even stranger, the map's longitudinal coordinates are suspiciously accurate for an era when calculating longitude at sea was virtually impossible. Piri Reis himself admitted he compiled the map from older sources, including very ancient Greek and Arabic charts. Could these lost maps preserve knowledge from a pre-glacial era? Skeptics argue it's all coincidence. They point out that the map's distortions, like South America stretched oddly eastward, prove it's imperfect, a patchwork of sailors' tales and guesswork. As for Antarctica, maybe Piri Reis simply filled empty space with speculative land, a common practice among cartographers of his time. Their accurate features, they say, could be misidentified parts of South America's coast or pure luck. But this ignores Reis's own notes, where he explicitly references sources dating back to Alexander the Great's era, including a map drawn in the time of Ptolemy. Were these references just boasting or clues to a forgotten golden age of exploration? The most radical theory suggests the map preserves memories of a lost civilization, perhaps the mythical seafarers of Atlantis or an advanced prehistoric culture capable of global navigation. Ancient astronaut theorists pounce on this, but mainstream scholars like Charles Hapgood proposed a tamer yet still shocking idea: that an ice-free Antarctica was last mapped around 4000 BC by an unknown maritime culture whose works were passed down through libraries like Alexandria's before fragments reached Piri Reis. Hapgood's hypothesis gained enough traction that the U.S. Air Force even analyzed the map in 1960, conceding its depiction of Antarctica was strikingly similar to sub-ice topography. Yet the mystery lingers like fog over uncharted waters. If Piri Reis's sources were real, where are they now? Burned in the destruction of the Library of Alexandria, lost in the collapse of the Ottoman Empire? Or perhaps still hidden, waiting to be rediscovered in some dusty archive? The map's true power isn't in the lines it draws, but the questions it erases. It forces us to confront the possibility that history's dark ages might have been brighter than we think, that our ancestors saw further, sailed farther, and remembered more than we've ever given them credit. And that's the real enigma, not what the map shows, but how much we've forgotten. Piri Reis himself left cryptic notes in the margins of his map, claiming he synthesized it from 20 older sources, some dating back to the 4th century BC, including charts once housed in Alexandria's legendary library. This admission sends historians down a rabbit hole of possibilities. The Library of Alexandria was the Google of the ancient world, compiling maps and texts from Babylonian, Phoenician, and Greek explorers, many now lost to fire and time. Could fragments of that knowledge have survived long enough to reach Ottoman hands? Manuscripts like the Geography of Ptolemy, which remarkably included coordinates for lands beyond Europe, prove advanced cartography existed in antiquity. But Ptolemy's work only accounts for the known world, not Antarctica's hidden contours. This gap fuels theories of even older, unrecorded seafaring cultures. The most compelling evidence comes from comparing the Piri Reis map to the work of Orontius Phineus, another 16th century cartographer who independently depicted Antarctica's ice-free coastline. Both maps share startling similarities, suggesting they tapped into the same ancient sources. Add to this the Dulcet Portolan of 1339, which shows Greenland with near-modern accuracy despite medieval Europe supposedly lacking polar exploration. These overlaps hint at a forgotten lineage of geographic knowledge, passed like a whispered secret through generations of scholars. But how could pre-modern civilizations map continents they never visited? Enter the controversial Portolan tradition, medieval nautical charts so precise they baffle modern researchers. Unlike typical maps that distorted coastlines for artistic effect, Portolans used mathematical projections akin to modern Mercator maps, with wind roses and room lines for navigation. Some historians argue these techniques trace back to the Phoenicians, master sailors who may have circumnavigated Africa 2,000 years before Vasco da Gama. A handful of classical texts support this. Herodotus mentions Phoenicians sailing for Pharaoh Necho around 600 BC, claiming they completed a 3-year voyage from the Red Sea back to the Mediterranean via the Atlantic, a feat requiring advanced mapping. Then there's the radical fringe, claims that the maps preserve Ice Age knowledge. Geologist Charles Hapgood proposed that around 12,000 years ago, a seafaring civilization, perhaps the mythical Atlanteans, mapped Antarctica before glaciers consumed it. His theory gained unlikely support from Albert Einstein, who wrote in 1953 that Earth's crust could shift, altering continents' positions, potentially explaining why some ancient maps seem misaligned. Mainstream science rejects this, but Hapgood's core observation remains haunting. The maps do depict landforms buried under millennia of ice. The truth may lie somewhere between lost brilliance and lucky accidents. Piri Reis likely merged fractured knowledge distorted by centuries of copying errors with contemporary Portuguese charts of newly discovered lands. Yet the ghostly accuracy of certain features defies simple explanation. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't in proving extraterrestrials or Atlantis, but in recognizing how much ancient cultures achieved before their records turned to dust. Every crease in the Piri Reis map seems to whisper, we've only just begun to fathom what our ancestors truly knew. Beneath the quiet farmlands of China's Zhejiang province lies a subterranean wonder that defies all logic: the Longyu Caves. Discovered in 1992 when a curious villager drained a local pond and uncovered an entrance, these sprawling, hand-carved chambers stretch across 30,000 square meters, their walls decorated with uniform chisel marks and their ceilings supported by towering rock pillars. The scale is staggering. The largest cavern could swallow an entire football stadium, yet every inch bears the meticulous mark of human hands. But here's what chills historians to the bone: not a single scroll, not one ancient poem, no fragment of any record mentions their construction. How does an undertaking this massive vanish from history without a trace? The precision of the caves whispers of extraordinary skill. Each wall is angled at a perfect 60 degrees, covered in parallel grooves that suggest assembly line labor, yet no tool marks indicate how the stone was removed. Modern engineers estimate over 1 million cubic meters of rock were excavated enough to fill 200 Olympic swimming pools, yet no rubble piles or disposal sites have ever been found. Where did all that stone go? Some theorize it built nearby villages, but no structures in the region match the volume. Even stranger, the pillars supporting the ceilings aren't randomly placed. They align in patterns that mirror constellations, raising questions about celestial influences in their design. Dating the caves only deepens the enigma. Initial estimates place them around 2,000 years old, but recent tests on calcite deposits suggest they could be twice that age. If true, they predate China's first imperial dynasty, meaning their builders belonged to a culture forgotten even by antiquity. The lack of soot-marked torches would leave implies alternative lighting methods, while the absence of structural cracks after millennia hints at geological knowledge we'd attribute only to modern science. Locals tell tales of the caves being slumbering dragons or gateways to underworld kingdoms, but archaeologists grapple with practical theories. Were they quarries? Unlikely. The effort outweighs any practical need, and the decorative elements serve no industrial purpose. Hidden tombs, no remains or grave goods have surfaced. Military bunkers, no strategic value aligns with their layout. The most haunting possibility: they were never meant to last. Some researchers propose the caves were ritual spaces, their very excavation serving as a spiritual act, the removal of stone as a form of devotion. Once complete, the builders may have walked away, leaving no explanation because the act itself was the purpose. What lingers isn't just the mystery of who carved them, but why we insist they must have a reason. The Longyu Caves resist categorization, their silent halls mocking our need for neat historical narratives. They stand as a monument not to kings or empires, but to the human capacity for wonder. and the unsettling truth that some stories are carved in stone, yet their meanings slip through our fingers like sand. Step inside the Longyu caves, clap your hands just once, and the sound doesn't fade, it lingers, rolling through the caverns like a murmuring chorus. This isn't just an echo, it's a symphony of precision. Certain chambers amplify whispers into booming declarations, while others distort speech into eerie, resonant tones. The acoustics are so deliberate, so engineered, that they shatter any notion of these caves being mere quarries or storage pits. Whoever carved these halls didn't just move stone, they composed with it, shaping the very air to carry sound in ways that defy natural cave formations. What could explain this auditory mastery? One theory points to ritual. Ancient Chinese traditions often linked sound to spirituality, using bells and drums to communicate with the divine. Imagine ceremonies where chants, amplified by the walls, seemed to rise from the earth itself, a dialogue between the living and the unseen. The Mogao caves along the Silk Road, though younger, show similar acoustic intent, with Buddhist chants designed to resonate. But Longyu's precision goes further. Tests reveal that specific frequencies, like those of traditional instruments, bounce with unnatural clarity. Were these caves designed as instruments, their pillars and angles tuned like the strings of a zither? Then there's the storage hypothesis. Some researchers propose the caves housed perishable goods, with the echoes acting as a primitive security system. A footstep or rustle would ripple through the chambers, alerting guards to intruders. Yet this feels too pragmatic. The echoes aren't uniform, they're curated, suggesting a purpose beyond utility. The most haunting possibility, the acoustics were unintended, a side effect of a forgotten construction technique. Without written records, we're left with the echoes of choices we can't decipher. Every sound that lingers in these halls is a ghost of intent, a clue without a key. The caves don't just reflect sound, they reflect our own limitations, their perfect echoes mocking the silence of history. High on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, the ghostly pillars of Göbekli Tepe rise from the earth like frozen sentinels. Carved with intricate animal reliefs, snakes slithering, foxes leaping, scorpions poised to strike, these massive limestone monoliths form the world's oldest known temple, dating back an astonishing 12,000 years. But here's the twist that rewrites history. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, a people who supposedly lacked the organization, resources, and permanence to erect such monuments. This wasn't just a shrine, it was a sprawling complex of 20 circular enclosures, some with pillars weighing over 16 tons, hauled from quarries hundreds of meters away. How did nomadic bands, without agriculture or domesticated animals, achieve what should have been impossible? The timeline alone defies logic. Conventional wisdom holds that monumental architecture emerged after the Neolithic Revolution, when farming allowed surplus food and settled communities. Yet Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture by at least 1,000 years. Its builders hadn't even invented pottery. They were mobile foragers following wild herds and seasons. So why invest years, possibly generations, carving and transporting these stones? The site's lead archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, proposed a radical idea. Maybe it wasn't farms that birthed civilization, but religion. The spiritual need to gather, worship, and build might have preceded and even inspired the domestication of plants and animals. Imagine that, gods before grain. Then there's the labor puzzle. Each T-shaped pillar required extracting 50 tons of limestone, shaping it with flint tools, then dragging it uphill without wheels or beasts of burden. Experiments show this would have taken teams of 50 people working for weeks per pillar, but hunter-gatherer bands rarely exceeded 25 individuals. The answer: seasonal gatherings. Like Mecca or Burning Man, Göbekli Tepe might have drawn scattered groups from across the region for rituals, turning construction into a collective pilgrimage. Animal bones found on-site from gazelles, aurochs, and wild boars suggest massive feasts fueling both bodies and social bonds. The carvings whisper darker mysteries. Many pillars depict predators, lions, vultures, spiders, often hovering over headless human figures. Some researchers see this as evidence of death cults or ancestor worship. Others spot early constellations mapping the night sky onto stone. One chilling theory suggests the site was a skull cult center. Fragments of carved human craniums have been found nearby. Were these pillars tombstones, altars, or portals to another world? The silent stones refuse to say. Most haunting of all is the deliberate burial. Around 8000 BC, someone meticulously filled every enclosure with thousands of tons of rubble, preserving the site like a time capsule. Was this sacred retirement or a desperate act to contain something within? The truth lies buried, but one thing's clear. Göbekli Tepe forces us to rewrite the story of civilization. The first temples didn't crown the rise of cities, they planted the seed, and that changes everything. The animal carvings at Göbekli Tepe don't just adorn the pillars, they command them. Each T-shaped monolith isn't merely decorated. It's transformed, the stone brought to life with creatures so vivid they seem to writhe under your fingertips. Foxes arch their backs in mid-pounce, herons stretch wings wider than a man's arm span, and serpents coil around the edges like living vines. But these aren't random portraits of the Neolithic world. They're a coded language, a message from 12,000 years ago that we've only begun to decipher. Start with the sheer variety. Over 40 animal species have been identified across the pillars, from docile ducks to fearsome lions. Some, like scorpions and vultures, appear repeatedly, clustered in specific enclosures. The arrangement isn't arbitrary. Certain animals face each other in what might be ritualistic confrontations, while others form narrative sequences like the famous vulture pillar, where the bird of prey hovers ominously over a headless human figure. Archaeologists initially dismissed these as hunting scenes, but the more we study them, the clearer it becomes. This is myth-making in stone. The astronomical angle deepens the intrigue. Researcher Martin Sweatman proposed that the animal reliefs represent constellations, mapping the night sky as it appeared around 10,900 BC. See, the scorpion aligns with Scorpius, the duck with Libra, even the infamous vulture mirrors the Cygnus constellation. Radiocarbon dating reveals that Göbekli Tepe's construction coincided with the Younger Dryas period, a time of catastrophic climate shifts. Could these carvings be a celestial warning, a way to track cosmic events tied to earthly disasters? Skeptics argue that connecting animals to constellations is speculative, but the precision is hard to ignore. At enclosure D, a pillar's central H-shaped symbol matches the position of Orion's belt during the spring equinox, suggesting deliberate alignment. Then there's the shamanic interpretation. Anthropologists like David Lewis Williams see the carvings as visions from altered states of consciousness. The way serpents and geometric patterns appear in trance-induced hallucinations across cultures. The T-shaped pillars themselves might represent stylized humans, their arms folded in ritual postures, while the animals symbolize spirit guides. This theory gains traction from the discovery of psychoactive plant residues nearby, hinting at ceremonies where the boundaries between worlds blurred. But the most chilling possibility, these carvings weren't just art or astronomy, they were wardings, the headless figures, the predator-prey dynamics, the pervasive vultures associated with excarnation, the practice of exposing dead bodies to birds, all point to a death cult grappling with mortality's mystery. At nearby Navali Sori, similar reliefs show decapitated heads carried in baskets, while Göbekli Tepe's own skull building contained modified craniums with drilled holes. Were these pillars guardians against the unseen, their animal avatars meant to trap or repel malevolent forces? The truth might lie in the gaps between theories. These carvings refuse to fit neatly into any single framework. They're at once zodiac and scripture, nightmare and prayer. What's certain is that their creators saw the world through a lens we've lost, where every beast on the stone held layers of meaning. predator, star, god, ancestor. And as the wind howls through those ancient pillars today, the animals remain silent witnesses to a cosmology we're still struggling to hear. Isolated in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, Easter Island's stone giants, the Moai, stand as silent witnesses to one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles. Towering as high as 33 feet and weighing up to 80 tons, these monolithic figures were carved from volcanic tuff at Rono-Roroku Quarry, then transported up to 11 miles across rugged terrain to stone platforms called ahu. The sheer scale of this feat has baffled researchers for centuries. How did the Rapa Nui people, with no wheels, no large animals, and no metal tools, achieve what seems logistically impossible? The most tantalizing clue comes from the statues themselves. Dozens of moai lie abandoned along ancient roads, toppled mid-journey like frozen travelers. Their positions suggest movement, but the method remains hotly debated. One radical theory, proposed by researchers Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, argues the statues walked. Imagine teams of rope pullers rocking the moai side to side, inching them forward in a rhythmic shuffle, a technique demonstrated in experiments that moved replica statues hundreds of meters with just 15 people. The statue's design supports this. Tilted bases and elongated torsos could have allowed controlled pivoting, while the road's slightly concave paths might have prevented tipping. But skeptics point to the statue's fragile necks. Wouldn't such motion risk decapitation? Then there's the traditional sledge theory. Oral histories speak of maraca, wooden sledges dragged over lubricated log tracks. Experiments show this method works, but Easter Island's scant timber supply raises questions. By the time Europeans arrived, the island was nearly treeless, a result of deforestation that some blame on reckless statue transport. Yet newer pollen studies reveal the island's palm forests were already dwindling before most moai were erected. Could the Rapa Nui have used other materials like sweet potato vines or rope made from hibiscus bark to mitigate wood use? The most haunting evidence lies in the quarry itself. Hundreds of unfinished moai remain partially carved into the rock, their eyeless faces staring blankly as if interrupted mid-creation. Tools scattered nearby basalt toki picks worn to nubs speak of relentless labor. But deeper still, recent LiDAR scans uncovered hidden roads and toppled moai beneath vegetation, suggesting transport didn't just stop, it collapsed. Perhaps the answer isn't in how they moved the statues, but why they suddenly couldn't. What lingers isn't just the mystery of engineering, but of choices. The moai weren't just monuments, they were conduits for mana, spiritual power linking ancestors to the living. Each statue moved was an act of faith, a defiance of limits. And when the last one fell, it wasn't just a civilization crumbling, it was a conversation with the divine, cut short mid-sentence. The moai's silence today isn't just absence. It's a question: how far would you go for what you believe in? The towering moai of Easter Island stand not just as monuments to human ingenuity, but as stark warnings of a civilization teetering on the edge. For decades, their silent gaze has framed a haunting question. Did the Rapa Nui people trigger their own collapse through relentless statue construction? Or were these stone giants the last desperate prayers of a society already unraveling? The answer lies tangled in layers of ecological and cultural clues, each more sobering than the last. Start with the island's ecological autopsy. Pollen samples drilled from ancient lakebeds reveal a tragic timeline. Once lush with towering palm forests, Easter Island underwent rapid deforestation between 1200 and 1600 AD. Precisely when moai production peaked, the trees didn't just vanish, they were methodically slaughtered, their wood repurposed for sledges, rollers, and rope to transport the ever-growing statues. Without forests to anchor the soil, erosion crippled agriculture. Bird populations deprived of nesting habitats plummeted, stripping the island of a vital protein source. The very act of moving moai, once seen as a spiritual triumph, may have been an ecological death sentence. yet newer research throws this narrative into doubt. Analysis of tool marks on abandoned statues suggests carving continued even as resources dwindled, hinting at cultural obsession overriding survival instincts. The largest moai ever attempted, a staggering 70 feet tall, still embedded in Rano-Roroku slopes, was initiated after the deforestation crisis began. Why would a society on the brink invest in such a suicidal project? Some archaeologists argue the moai weren't the cause of collapse but a frantic response to it. As crops failed and clans warred over dwindling resources, erecting ever grander statues might have been a plea for ancestral intervention, a last-ditch effort to restore balance through sheer spiritual spectacle. The archaeological record whispers of this desperation. Excavations at Ahu platforms reveal later moai were increasingly smaller and cruder, their stone bases recycled from older, toppled ancestors. Then came the violent obsidian spear points called mat, a later settlement layers, along with fractured bones showing signs of blunt force trauma. Yet even amidst this chaos, the Rapa Nui adapted. They shifted from monolithic projects to innovative stone gardens called manavai, circular enclosures that trapped moisture and revitalized barren soil. The moai's abandonment wasn't surrender, it was pragmatism born of catastrophe. What makes Easter Island's story so chilling isn't its inevitability, but its echoes. Like the Norse on Greenland or the Maya at Capon, the Rapa Nui faced a slow-motion disaster they could see coming, yet cultural momentum blinded them to alternatives until it was too late. The moai stand today not just as relics of a lost people, but as mirrors. In their hollow eyes, we glimpse our own dilemmas, the monuments we build, literal and metaphorical, that may one day outlast the resources needed to sustain them. The stones don't judge, they simply ask, what will you choose to worship when the trees are gone? Buried beneath the arid plains of modern-day Pakistan and India, the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro guard one of history's most tantalizing linguistic puzzles. The Indus Valley civilization, thriving over 4,000 years ago, left behind meticulously planned cities, advanced drainage systems, and thousands of inscribed seals, yet their script, a cascade of intricate symbols resembling fish, arrows, and stick figures, remains stubbornly silent. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which were cracked open by the Rosetta Stone and Behistun inscriptions, the Indus script has defied every attempt at translation. With no bilingual texts and no clear descendant language, these symbols are a locked door without a key. The sheer volume of inscriptions should make decipherment easier. Over 4,000 artifacts bearing the script have been unearthed, but here's the catch: most are painfully short. The longest inscription contains just 26 characters, a fleeting whisper compared to the epic tablets of Mesopotamia. Some researchers argue these weren't words at all, but non-linguistic symbols denoting clan marks or trade tallies. Yet statistical analysis reveals patterns eerily similar to known languages, recurring sign sequences, positional rules, even evidence of prefixes and suffixes. The script behaves like a language, it just refuses to confess which one. Enter the Dravidian hypothesis. Linguists like Asko Parpola point to striking parallels between Indus symbols and later scripts used by Dravidian-speaking cultures in southern India. One recurring sign, a fish, might double as a phonetic pun, since the Proto-Dravidian word for fish, min, also means star. Could this be a playful rebuse where symbols represent sounds rather than objects? Computer models comparing the script structure to known Dravidian languages show promise, but skeptics counter that without a Rosetta Stone-style bilingual text, any translation remains speculative at best. The script's visual grammar deepens the intrigue. Unlike linear scripts, Indus symbols often cluster like mosaics, with tiny marks modifying larger ones. A single jar sign might sprout strokes or dots, hinting at grammatical changes, perhaps tenses or possessives. Even the direction of writing is contested. Some seals suggest right to left, others left to right, as if the scribes themselves couldn't decide. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in what's missing. Later Vedic texts from the region make no mention of the script, suggesting knowledge of it vanished along with the civilization itself. Was it a casualty of climate change as shifting monsoon patterns forced populations eastward, or did invading Indo-European speakers deliberately suppress it? The stones won't say. What lingers isn't just frustration but awe. The Indus script challenges our assumption that all great civilizations must shout their stories across millennia. Sometimes they choose to whisper, and the quietest voices are the hardest to hear. Among the thousands of Indus Valley artifacts, one peculiar symbol appears with stubborn consistency: a short-horned bull, often carved with such lifelike precision you can almost hear it snort. This motif, found on over half of all excavated trade seals, isn't just decorative. Its ubiquity hints at something deeper: a proto-logo, a Bronze Age brand stamp signaling ownership, origin, or quality. Unlike the cryptic sequences of script accompanying them, these bull carvings feel instantly communicative, transcending language barriers the way a Nike swoosh or Apple silhouette does today. Could this be the smoking gun that cracks the Indus code? Zoom in on the details, and the bull theory gains traction. Archaeologists note these seals cluster around specific sites and artifact types, particularly bundles of goods like cotton, ivory, and lapis lazuli destined for distant Mesopotamia. Intriguingly, Mesopotamian trade records mention a place called Meluha, widely believed to be the Indus Valley, praising its exotic bulls and dark wood. The recurring bull symbol might have served as a Meluhan trademark, assuring foreign buyers of authenticity. Modern supply chains use similar shorthand. Think Swiss-made on watches or champagne on bottles. The difference: our labels rely on alphabets the world recognizes. The Indus traders communicated through universal imagery, letting the bull's horns do the talking. Yet not all symbols were so literal. Some seals feature fantastical hybrids: bulls with elephant trunks or unicorns with pincer-like horns. These chimeras, argues anthropologist Steve Farmer, might represent clan totems or guild emblems rather than attempts at realism. In ancient Mesopotamia, composite creatures like Lamashu signaled divine protection. Perhaps Indus hybrids played a similar role: spiritual warranties stamped onto goods. The sheer variety complicates things. If bulls denoted Meluha, what did unicorns mean? Were there sub-regions, specialty crafts, or social ranks encoded in these variations? The most tantalizing clue lies in the script's relationship to the art. On many seals, symbols cluster above the animal like a caption, suggesting the image and text worked in tandem. Imagine a modern logo with a tagline: the bull as visual shorthand, the script spelling out details like "Produce of Harappa" or "Inspected by Lot 12." Linguist Massimo Vidal proposed these could be nominal phrases. Think of them as Bronze Age barcodes, where the bull identified the product category and the glyphs listed batch numbers or maker's codes. It's a compelling idea, but without a bilingual ledger, we're left guessing whether these glyphs represented sounds, concepts, or something else entirely. What makes these seals so frustrating and fascinating is their duality. They're simultaneously straightforward and inscrutable. The imagery speaks across millennia with vivid immediacy, while the script remains a locked vault. Perhaps the truth lies in between. Not a full language, not mere pictures, but a sophisticated system of symbolic shorthand that blended both. After all, trade doesn't always need verbs and grammar. Sometimes all it takes is a bull you can trust. Deep in the steamy jungles of Mexico's Gulf Coast, 17 massive stone heads stare blankly across the centuries, each one carved from a single block of volcanic basalt, some weighing up to 40 tons. These are the Olmec colossal heads, the most iconic artifacts of Mesoamerica's first major civilization, created between 1500 and 400 B. See, what makes them extraordinary isn't just their sheer size. It's the questions they raise. The faces are strikingly individualistic, with broad noses, full lips, and folds around the eyes, features that ignited decades of controversy when some researchers claimed they represented African visitors to the Americas. But the truth is far more complex, weaving together geology, artistry, and a civilization's obsession with identity. Start with the stone itself. The basalt used for these monoliths came from the Tuxtla Mountains, quarried from lava flows and transported up to 60 miles without wheels or draft animals. Archaeologists estimate moving just one head would have required over 1,500 laborers dragging sledges across swamps and rivers, an unimaginable feat of coordination. But why focus so much effort on portraits? Each head wears a distinctive helmet, some adorned with jaguar motifs or abstract designs, suggesting these weren't generic rulers but specific individuals. The level of detail is astonishing. One head even has a dimpled chin, while another's helmet bears a strap that appears to dig slightly into the flesh beneath it. This wasn't just sculpture, it was frozen biography. Then there's the African connection. When the first head was unearthed in 1862, its features sparked wild theories about transatlantic contact. Later, anthropologist Ivan van Sertima's controversial work They Came Before Columbus popularized the idea of pre-Columbian African influence. Mainstream scholars overwhelmingly reject this, pointing to DNA evidence showing no African admixture in ancient Olmec remains. The facial traits, they argue, reflect the diversity of indigenous Amerindian populations, some of whom naturally share broad nasal bridges and epicanthic folds with African populations due to convergent evolution. The helmets further root these heads in local tradition, resembling ballgame headgear seen in later Mesoamerican art. But the real mystery isn't their origin, it's their purpose. Unlike Egyptian pharaoh statues meant to intimidate or deify, the Olmec heads feel intensely human. Some archaeologists interpret them as portraits of revered rulers, possibly ball players or warlords. Others note their placement near ceremonial centers suggests a ritual role. Perhaps they witnessed sacrifices or processions. The most haunting theory comes from their final fate. Several heads were deliberately buried, some face down, as if ritually killed. Was this an act of disrespect toward toppled dynasties or a sacred act of preservation? What lingers is the Olmec's silent defiance. These heads refuse to fit neatly into our box's art or propaganda, local or foreign, memorial or idol. They stand as reminders that identity is carved not just in stone, but in the gaps between what we see and what we assume. And in those gaps, whole histories wait to be rediscovered. Imagine trying to haul a school bus-sized block of volcanic rock through 60 miles of sweltering jungle, using nothing but ropes, logs, and human muscle. That was the daily reality for Olmec engineers tasked with transporting the raw material for their colossal heads from the Tuxtla Mountains quarries to their ceremonial centers. The absence of wheels or domesticated animals like oxen, staples of old-world monument building, makes their achievement even more staggering. Modern experiments reveal the likely method. Teams of hundreds dragged the basalt on wooden sledges along carefully prepared causeways, a technique requiring coordination so precise it borders on choreography. But the real ingenuity lies in the unseen details. Researchers studying ancient transport routes near San Lorenzo, the oldest Olmec capital, discovered remnants of raised pathways paved with crushed stone and compacted clay. These weren't just dirt trails, they were engineered roads designed to withstand the weight of multi-ton monoliths during seasonal rains. Even more remarkably, the Olmec may have leveraged their environment rather than fighting it. During flood seasons, they could have floated partially carved stones down rivers using rafts, a tactic later employed by the Maya. Archaeologists found basalt flakes in riverbeds downstream from quarries, suggesting sculptors began roughing out the heads before transport to reduce weight. Then there's the human factor. Unlike the slave labor depicted in old-world pyramid-building narratives, Olmec society likely operated on collective effort. The heads themselves provide clues, some wear headgear resembling ballgame helmets, hinting that honored athletes or warriors might have organized transport as communal rituals. Experimental archaeology confirms the feasibility. In a 2011 project, volunteers moved a 25-ton replica head 1 mile in under a week using only Mesoamerican-era tools, proving that coordinated teamwork could achieve the impossible. The most haunting question isn't how they moved the stones, but why they chose such an arduous process. Unlike the Egyptians, who used local limestone for most statues, the Olmec deliberately sourced basalt from distant quarries despite softer alternatives nearby. This suggests the journey itself held meaning. Perhaps the stone's origin was tied to spiritual power, or the labor of transport served as a rite of passage. Every scrape of rope against stone, every shout of direction, became part of the sculpture's story long before chisels ever touched its surface. What emerges isn't just a technical solution, but a cultural philosophy. The Olmec didn't conquer their landscape, they conversed with it, turning geological obstacles into collaborative triumphs. Their silent basalt giants still stand today, not just as art, but as testaments to what humans can achieve when they pull together, literally. And that may be the most enduring mystery of all, not the logistics, but the sheer will that made them possible. High on the walls of Egypt's Dendera temple complex, a series of enigmatic carvings have sparked debates that blur the line between ancient art and advanced technology. One relief in particular shows a striking scene: a giant, elongated object resembling a modern light bulb, complete with a snaking filament inside, held aloft by a priestly figure. Surrounding it are figures who appear to be tending to the device, their poses suggesting ritual or maintenance. To some, this is clear evidence the ancient Egyptians harnessed electricity, thousands of years before its supposed discovery. To others, it's a symbolic representation layered with mythological meaning. So which is it? The answer lies in the shadows between what we see and what we assume. Start with the literal interpretation. Engineer and author Erich von Däniken popularized the Dendera light bulb theory, pointing to the bulb-like shape's resemblance to early Crookes tubes, glass vessels used in 19th century electrical experiments. The central filament looks uncannily like an illuminated wire, while the cable trailing to a box evokes a primitive power source. Proponents cite other curiosities: the absence of soot in certain temple chambers where torches would have blackened ceilings, and the discovery of Baghdad battery-like artifacts elsewhere in the region. Could these carvings document lost electroplating techniques or even lighting systems? Experiments with replicas show that with the right electrolyte, like the vinegar available to ancient Egyptians, similar objects could produce a faint glow, though hardly enough to illuminate entire halls. Yet Egyptologists overwhelmingly dismiss this reading, and their objections are rooted in context. The relief appears in the temple's crypt, a space dedicated to the goddess Hathor's resurrection myth. The bulb closely matches the form of a jed pillar, a symbol of stability crossed with a lotus flower representing creation. The filament aligns with artistic conventions for depicting serpents, specifically the cosmic snake Sota emerging from a lotus, a motif tied to rebirth. Even the priestly attendants fit. They're standard figures in temple iconography, offering sacred symbols to deities, not maintaining machinery. The most compelling evidence against the lightbulb theory comes from parallel carvings. Nearby scenes show nearly identical bulbs sprouting from the god Osiris's corpse, sprouting vines clearly representing vegetative rebirth, not technology. And if these were blueprints for lighting, why no physical remnants? No wires, no glass fragments, no corroborating text describing artificial light. Even Herodotus, who meticulously recorded Egyptian marvels, never mentioned such inventions. But here's where the mystery deepens. The tension between these views might be the whole point. The Dendera carvings thrive in ambiguity, merging the scientific and sacred in ways that defy modern categories. Ancient Egyptians saw no contradiction between symbolic truth and practical function. To them, the serpent wasn't just a metaphor for life force, it was life force as real as voltage is to us. The relief might not depict a light bulb, but it does capture something profound: humanity's timeless urge to harness invisible energies, whether through myth or physics. So perhaps the real lesson of the Dendera light isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about how easily we project our own world onto the past, mistaking symbolism for schematics. The ancients didn't need light bulbs to illuminate their temples, they had myths that shone just as bright. And in that light, the carving's true power flickers into view, not as a technical diagram, but as a mirror reflecting our own hunger to find modernity in antiquity. The only certainty: some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only savored. The discovery of the Baghdad battery doesn't just raise questions about a single artifact, it forces us to re-examine scattered clues hinting at a larger, shadowed chapter of ancient innovation. Similar electrochemical curiosities have surfaced across the Mediterranean and Near East, from gilded artifacts in Egypt to copper vases in Mesopotamia with unexplained corrosion patterns consistent with electrolysis. Could these be fragments of a lost technological tradition, one that flickered briefly before being extinguished by time? The evidence is tantalizingly circumstantial, but when pieced together, it paints a portrait of ancient experimentation that defies conventional timeline. Take the gilded silver figurines unearthed in the royal tombs of Ur, dating back to 2500 BC. Their gold layers are so microscopically thin and uniform that traditional methods like hammering or mercury gilding struggle to explain them. Modern metallurgists have replicated similar results using electroplating techniques, suggesting the Sumerians might have stumbled upon a primitive form of electrochemical deposition long before it was formally understood. Even more compelling are the Dendera light carvings in Egypt, often dismissed as mythological symbolism. But when viewed alongside the Baghdad battery, their bulb-like shapes and snaking filaments take on new ambiguity. Could they represent not just abstract concepts, but observations of real phenomena? Then there's the curious case of the Lycurgus cup, a 4th century Roman glass chalice that changes color depending on light direction. Nanotechnology analysis revealed the glass contains gold and silver particles ground so finely they interact with light at the quantum level, a technique requiring precise colloidal chemistry. While not electrical per se, it demonstrates an empirical understanding of material science that parallels the trial and error ingenuity behind the Baghdad battery's design. Critics argue these are isolated anomalies, not proof of systematic knowledge. After all, if ancient civilizations understood electrical principles, where are the wires, the generators, the manuals? But this assumes they would have used electricity as we do. Perhaps their applications were niche, limited to medicine, metallurgy, or ritual. The Greeks wrote of the numbing effect of electric fish shocks used in surgery, while the Parthians may have prized the Baghdad battery's tingling current for mystical experiences rather than practical utility. The most provocative question isn't whether these cultures had our modern understanding of electricity, but whether they harnessed its effects in ways we've yet to recognize. Like the Antikythera Mechanism's gears hinting at lost mechanical genius, the Baghdad battery and its cousins suggest a pattern of proto-scientific exploration, one that flickered at the edges of myth and craftsmanship before fading into obscurity. What's haunting isn't the absence of proof, but the possibility that we've been overlooking whispers of ingenuity hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to see them not as oddities, but as pieces of a puzzle we're only beginning to assemble. Off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, beneath the turquoise waves of the East China Sea, lies a structure so perplexing it's torn experts apart for decades. The Yonaguni Monument, a massive terraced formation of sandstone rising 25 meters from the ocean floor, looks like it was carved by human hands, straight edges, perfect right angles, and stair-like steps ascending in deliberate tiers. But here's the catch. It's submerged under 5 meters of water, and if it is man-made, it would have been constructed when the area was last above sea level over 10,000 years ago. That's a timeline that rewrites the history of civilization as we know it. Dive down to explore the site, and the case for human craftsmanship feels undeniable. The monument's centerpiece is a striking monolithic platform nicknamed the Turtle, flanked by 2 towering pillars that resemble gateposts. Nearby, a straight 30-meter-long wall drops into the depths at a near-perfect 90-degree angle, a feature almost unheard of in natural geology. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura, who studied the site for decades, points to tool marks and what appear to be quarrying scars on the rock, alongside carved channels that mimic irrigation systems found in ancient terrestrial ruins. Even more compelling are the symmetrical roads that radiate from the structure, intersecting at precise angles that mirror the street grids of known prehistoric cities. But skeptics like geologist Robert Schoch counter that nature is capable of astonishing mimicry. The Yonaguni Formation is made of sandstone, a rock prone to fracturing along clean plains due to tectonic stress. The steps could be the result of underwater landslides or seismic activity, while the walls might simply be parallel fault lines eroded by currents over millennia. Even the so-called tool marks could be the work of persistent marine life. Parrotfish, for example, gnaw at rock to consume algae, leaving behind grooves that resemble chisel strikes. Schoch's most damning argument: the entire region sits in an earthquake hotspot, where violent tectonic shifts routinely sculpt the seabed into surreal formations without human intervention. Yet the debate refuses to settle. Adding fuel to the fire are artifacts found scattered around the site: stone tools, pottery shards, and even a relief carving resembling a human face, though critics argue these could have washed in from elsewhere. Then there's the monument's alignment. Its northern face points toward the rising sun during the summer solstice, a trait shared by sacred sites like Stonehenge. Coincidence or evidence of intentional design? The heart of the mystery isn't just what Yonaguni is, but why it captivates us so deeply. Whether natural or man-made, the monument forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that our planet's history is far less settled than textbooks suggest. If it's artificial, it hints at a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity, one that flourished and vanished long before the pyramids rose. If it's natural, it serves as a humbling reminder that Earth's artistry can rival our own. Either way, Yonaguni lingers like a riddle carved in stone and seawater, a silent challenge from the depths, daring us to reconsider everything we think we know about the past. Could the Yonaguni monument be a surviving fragment of a lost Pacific civilization, the fabled lands of Mu or Lemuria that haunt legends across Polynesia and Asia? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Ancient creation myths from Hawaii to the Philippines speak of a vast continent that sank beneath the waves, leaving only scattered islands and mountaintops. 19th-century scholars like Augustus Laplongeon and James Churchward spun these tales into the myth of Mu, a sophisticated Pacific empire allegedly swallowed by the ocean 12,000 years ago. Yonaguni's submerged structures, they argue, fit the timeline, a potential smoking gun for a civilization erased by rising seas. Geologists, however, wield their own set of tools to dismantle this romantic narrative. The most damning evidence comes from sea level records. During the last ice age, when Yonaguni would have been above water, human societies were still hunter-gatherers with no known capacity for large-scale stone construction. The monument's sandstone also tells a story. Its sharp edges and flat plains align perfectly with the region's seismic activity, where tectonic stress fractures rock into geometric patterns. Skeptics demonstrate how underwater currents can sculpt similar formations off the coasts of Malta or Sicily. No lost cities required. Even the so-called carved face could be pareidolia, our brain's habit of seeing human forms in random shapes like a maritime Rorschach test. Yet the debate takes a curious turn when we examine local folklore. Okinawan fishermen have long spoken of Nurikani, a sunken paradise where gods dwell, accessible through underwater caves. Yonaguni's elders recount tales of a submerged village, visible on calm days, echoes of a time before the sea claimed the land. These stories, passed down for generations, predate modern archaeology. Could they preserve garbled memories of a real catastrophe? The most compelling middle ground might lie in nature's collaboration with human hands. Some researchers propose Yonaguni began as a natural formation, later modified by ancient peoples when the site was still coastal. Imagine a sacred space where the sea slowly encroached, its steps and terraces enhanced by rituals before finally succumbing to the waves. Whether temple or tectonic masterpiece, Yonaguni's true power lies in its defiance of easy answers, a riddle written in stone and tide, daring us to reconsider the boundaries between myth and memory. Among the brittle, 2,000-year-old Dead Sea Scrolls, one artifact stands apart, not for its spiritual wisdom but for its brazen materialism. Known as the Copper Scroll, this cryptic document isn't written on fragile parchment but hammered into sheets of metal, as if its creators wanted these words to outlast eternity. Discovered in 1952 in a cave near Qumran, the scroll lists 64 locations where staggering quantities of treasure are allegedly buried, over 4,600 talents of silver and nearly 1,300 talents of gold, along with precious oils, priestly vestments, and even other scrolls. At today's rates, that gold alone would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's the twist: scholars can't agree whether this is a real treasure map or an elaborate religious allegory, and the debate has raged for decades without resolution. The case for literal treasure starts with the scroll's shocking specificity. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls filled with biblical texts, the Copper Scroll reads like a bureaucratic inventory. In the ruin that is in the valley of Akka, under the steps entering the east, 40 talents of silver. In the cistern of the Melchiah courtyard, a copy of this document with its explanation and measurements. These aren't poetic metaphors, they're precise, almost clinical directions. Some researchers suggest it records the hidden wealth of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, smuggled out before the Romans sacked the city in 70 AD. Jewish historian Josephus mentions temple priests secreting away sacred vessels and the treasure of the poor during the revolt, supporting this theory. Yet the allegorical camp fires back with equally compelling points. The scroll's language diverges radically from other Dead Sea texts, filled with odd spellings and phrases like "dig down 4 cubits" and "in the mouth of the spring." Some scholars argue these are coded references to spiritual gifts rather than physical loot, pointing to parallels in Jewish mysticism where gold symbolizes divine wisdom. Then there's the sheer impracticality of the sums. The gold listed exceeds the entire treasury of the Roman Empire at its height. Could this be a symbolic map to heavenly rewards, etched in copper to signify its eternal importance? Modern technology has only deepened the riddle. When scientists painstakingly cut open the oxidized scroll in 1955, they found the metal so brittle it nearly crumbled. Today, multispectral imaging reveals hidden etchings and possible cipher patterns, suggesting layers of meaning. Treasure hunters have followed the scroll's clues to ruins near Jericho and the Kidron Valley, uncovering ancient tunnels, but no gold. Meanwhile, archaeologists like Robert Cargill propose a middle ground. Perhaps the scroll blends both realities, listing real temple items alongside metaphorical treasures to throw off Roman looters. What lingers isn't just the question of wealth, but why someone went to such lengths to preserve this message. Copper was expensive, why waste it on a hoax? Unless, of course, the real treasure was never meant to be dug up with shovels, but decoded with patience and faith. The scroll endures as a Rorschach test for our desires. Do we see greed or grace, history or hope? Maybe both. After all, the greatest mysteries aren't just about what's hidden there, about why we keep searching. The arid expanse of Israel's Judean desert has become a modern-day stage for high-stakes detective work, where scholars and adventurers armed with satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar chase the copper scroll's elusive promises. Unlike traditional archaeological digs focused on unraveling history, these expeditions pulse with a different energy, the thrill of a treasure hunt. One of the most ambitious efforts unfolded in the early 2000s when a team led by archaeologist John Allegretti targeted Cave 24, a site described in the scroll as holding 65 bars of gold. Using drone surveys to map the rugged terrain, they pinpointed a previously overlooked crevice, its entrance obscured by centuries of debris. Inside, they found not gold, but something equally tantalizing, a pottery shard bearing an inscription that matched the scroll's peculiar dialect, suggesting the artifact might have been a marker left by the original hiders. Yet the desert guards its secrets fiercely. In 2017, another crew drilled core samples near the ruins of Qumran, where the scroll was discovered, hoping to locate the cistern of the Melchiah courtyard mentioned in the text. Ground scans revealed a subterranean chamber, but excavation yielded only a handful of Roman-era nails and a single silver coin, far from the priestly treasures described. Skeptics seized on these near misses as proof the scroll was symbolic, but treasure hunters countered with an intriguing point: the directions might be deliberately misleading. The scroll's mix of Hebrew and Greek terms, along with its cryptic phrasing "under the stairs that ascend to the east," could be a cipher designed to foil Roman looters. Technology has transformed the search. In 2021, researchers employed LiDAR to create a 3D model of the Kidron Valley, cross-referencing the scroll's descriptions with erosion patterns and ancient water channels. One team zeroed in on a cave system near the Absalom Monument, where thermal imaging detected unnatural voids behind a rock face. Inside, they uncovered a recessed niche, empty, but with chisel marks indicating something heavy had once been stored there. The discovery reignited debate. Was this proof of plundered treasure or merely a coincidental storage space? Local Bedouin tribes add another layer to the mystery. Oral histories speak of metal books found in the 19th century, sold to antiquities dealers and lost to time. Some researchers speculate these could have been additional sections of the copper scroll, perhaps holding the key to its coded language. A rumor persists that a shepherd once stumbled upon a cache of gold vessels near Ein Gedi, only to melt them down for their material value, a heartbreaking possibility for historians. The real treasure of these quests might not be gold, but the questions they force us to confront. If the scroll is genuine, why has no significant haul been found? If it's allegory, why the painstaking detail? Each expedition, whether it uncovers artifacts or dead ends, peels back another layer of the puzzle. The desert's harsh beauty seems to mock our efforts, whispering that some secrets aren't meant to be unearthed, or worse, that we've been digging in the wrong places all along. The copper scroll's greatest lesson might be humility, a reminder that the past rarely surrenders its truths without a fight. Deep in the heart of Romania, a collection of small clay tablets sits at the center of one of archaeology's most heated debates. Known as the Tartaria tablets, these unassuming artifacts are etched with symbols that some researchers insist represent the earliest known writing system on Earth, dating back potentially to 5000 BC. That's a staggering 2,000 years older than Sumerian cuneiform, the writing system long considered humanity's first. But the moment you dive into the evidence, the controversy becomes as layered as the clay itself. The tablets were discovered in 1961 at a Neolithic site near the village of Tartaria, buried alongside human bones and other ritual objects. At first glance, their markings resemble abstract symbols, spirals, crosses, and stick figures, but closer inspection reveals something more deliberate. Some sequences repeat in patterns, while others cluster in ways that suggest grammatical structure. The most compelling example is a circular tablet divided into sections, each containing unique groupings of symbols that mirror the formatting of later accounting tablets from Mesopotamia. Could these be primitive ledgers, ritual texts, or even a proto-alphabet? Dating is where the mystery deepens. Radiocarbon analysis of associated bone fragments initially placed the tablets around 4500 B.C., but critics argue the samples could have been contaminated. The fire that baked the clay, likely a ceremonial cremation, might have reset their clock, making them appear far older. Then there's the stylistic argument. The symbols bear an uncanny resemblance to Voynich culture pottery markings found across the Balkans, which most archaeologists dismiss as decorative, not linguistic. But here's the twist. Unlike random pottery scratches, the Tartaria symbols show intentional sequencing. One tablet even depicts what looks like a narrative, a horned figure standing beside a plant, with symbols beneath that could be read as a caption. Skeptics counter that without a bilingual text or a larger corpus of examples, there's no way to confirm these marks functioned as true writing. They point to the Phaistos disc from Crete or the Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island artifacts covered in undeciphered symbols that might be art, not language. But the Tartaria tablets refuse to fit neatly into either category. Their symbols are more standardized than decorative scribbles, yet less developed than cuneiform. This gray zone has fueled radical theories, including claims they're evidence of a lost advanced culture predating Mesopotamia. What makes these tablets so electrifying isn't just the question of their age, it's the implication that writing might have been invented independently in multiple places, only for earlier attempts to vanish into obscurity. Imagine a world where the Voynich people, not the Sumerians, were the true pioneers of written communication, their legacy reduced to a handful of fragile clay fragments. The Tartaria tablets are a Rorschach test for our understanding of history. Either they're a misstated oddity, or they're the smoking gun of a forgotten intellectual revolution. And until someone cracks their code, they'll keep whispering tantalizing maybes from the shadows of prehistory. If the Tartaria tablets were the only relic of the Voynich culture's mysterious symbols, we might dismiss them as an anomaly. But scattered across the Balkans, from Serbia to Romania, over 1,500 artifacts bear these same strange markings: pottery fragments, figurines, and spindle walls etched with angular lines, crosses, and what look like rudimentary letters. This is the Voynich script, named after the Serbian site where they were first uncovered in the early 20th century, dating back to between 5,500 and 4,500 B.C. These symbols predate Mesopotamian cuneiform by millennia, yet they refuse to surrender their secrets. Unlike the orderly rows of Sumerian accounting tablets, the Voynich markings appear in isolated clusters or singular strokes, as if each symbol carried weight alone rather than as part of a sentence. Some resemble livestock, stick figure goats or grain stalks, while others are pure abstraction, zigzags, stars, and branching trees. The question isn't just what they mean, but how they functioned. Were these the first scribbles of a writing system aborted in its infancy, or something else entirely? What makes the Voynich culture so haunting isn't just their undeciphered script, it's the unsettling sophistication that surrounds it. These weren't primitive farmers, they were Europe's first metallurgists, smelting copper into tools and ornaments centuries before the Bronze Age. Their settlements boasted multi-room houses with clay ovens and granaries, while their artisans crafted exquisite figurines with exaggerated eyes and geometric tattoos, suggesting ritual or social status. At Turdas in Romania, archaeologists uncovered a temple complex with altars and sacrificial pits, hinting at a structured belief system. Yet despite this cultural richness, the Voynich left no clear lineage, no epic tales, only those cryptic symbols repeating across generations like a refrain everyone forgot the words to. The debate over whether these markings constitute true writing hinges on a technicality. Linguists define writing as a system capable of recording any spoken language, not just numbers or ownership tags. Sumerian cuneiform crossed this threshold when it evolved from counting sheep to composing poetry. The Vinci symbols, however, show no such progression. They don't cluster into sentences or adjust for context, yet dismissing them as mere decoration ignores their persistence. The same M-like symbol appears on pottery separated by centuries and miles, implying shared meaning. Could these have been proto-letters used like heraldic crests or maker's marks, or perhaps ritual sigils invoking gods or protecting homes? The most tantalizing clue lies in their distribution. Vinci symbols cluster around trade hubs and cult sites, suggesting they marked value or sacredness. At Plochnik in Serbia, a ceramic shard bears symbols beside a kiln, possibly a potter's signature or a warning about firing temperatures. Other fragments show symbols paired with animal bones, implying ritual use. This isn't writing as we know it, but it's not random either. It's a gray area between art and language where every stroke might have been a word to someone. Then there's the uncomfortable possibility that we're holding the key but can't recognize it. In 2014, mathematician Marco Merlini proposed that Vinci symbols functioned like a proto-writing system, a bridge between pictures and letters, used for limited purposes like labeling or prayers. He noted recurring combinations like a fish symbol followed by slashes, which might denote quantities. It's a compelling theory, but without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text linking Vinci symbols to a known language, we're left guessing. The Vinci's greatest legacy might be their silence. They built, traded, worshipped, and then vanished, their symbols outlasting their voice. Those markings endure not as a code to crack, but as a reminder that writing isn't an on-off switch, it's a spectrum, and the Vinci may have wandered its early paths before the light of history found them. Their mystery isn't just what they wrote, but why they stopped, and that's a question no dictionary can answer. Scattered across the misty highlands of Laos, thousands of ancient stone jars lie half-buried in the earth like forgotten sentinels, some standing upright, others toppled, their rims worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind. This is the Plain of Jars, one of Southeast Asia's most enigmatic archaeological sites, where megalithic vessels the size of bathtubs dot the landscape in clusters that stretch for miles. Carved from sandstone, granite, and even coral limestone, these massive containers range from 3 to 10 feet tall, some weighing several tons. But what chills the spine isn't just their scale, it's the unanswered questions clinging to them like jungle humidity. Who carved these jars? Why were they placed here, and how has a landscape meant to honor the dead become a lethal minefield, where researchers must tread carefully between unraveling history and avoiding unexploded bombs? The leading theory suggests the jars served as funerary urns, holding cremated remains or bodies for excarnation, a practice where the deceased were exposed to the elements until only bones remained. Excavations have unearthed human bones, teeth, and burial artifacts inside and around the jars, alongside ceramic pots that might have held offerings for the afterlife. Local legends speak of a giant king named Kun Cheung who forged the jars to brew rice wine after a victorious battle, but archaeologists point to a darker purpose. The jars' distribution mirrors ancient trade routes, hinting at a widespread death ritual among Iron Age cultures between 500 B.C. and 500 A.D. Some jars even contain secondary burials, smaller ceramic urns nested inside, suggesting generations revisited these sites to honor their dead. Yet the Plain of Jars guards its secrets fiercely, and not just through the passage of time. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military dropped over 270 million cluster bombs on Laos, many landing here, leaving the landscape littered with unexploded ordnance. Today, bright red markers dot the fields, warning researchers and curious travelers of the deadly debris still lurking beneath the soil. less than 10% of the known jar sites have been safely cleared for study, forcing archaeologists to rely on remote sensing and drone surveys to map the rest. It's a cruel irony. A place dedicated to commemorating the dead now threatens the living, its very soil weaponized by modern conflict. The limited excavations that have taken place reveal tantalizing clues. At Site 1, the largest and most accessible jar group, researchers found iron tools, glass beads, and spindle whorls, evidence of a sophisticated society engaged in trade and textile production. But the real puzzle lies in the jars' transportation. Many were quarried from mountains miles away and hauled uphill without wheels or draft animals. How indigenous oral histories mention wooden rollers and bamboo sledges, while experiments show teams of laborers could have moved the jars during the dry season when the ground was firm. Yet the sheer number of jars, over 2,000 across 80 sites, suggests a level of social organization that defies the region's sparse population records. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't how they were moved, but why here. The jars cluster on plateaus with sweeping views, often near mountain passes or water sources. Some researchers propose these were territorial markers, linking the living and the dead in a cultural claim to the land. Others see astronomical alignments. Certain jar groupings mirror star patterns visible during the monsoon season, when the Milky Way arcs overhead like a cosmic river. Could these have been waypoints for souls journeying to the afterlife? The Plain of Jars stands as a testament to human resilience and tragedy, a place where ancient rituals collide with modern scars. Unraveling its mysteries requires more than shovels and brushes. It demands courage to walk where the earth still remembers war. Each jar is a time capsule, waiting for the day when the last bomb is cleared and its story can finally be heard. Until then, they remain silent witnesses, their purpose whispered only in the wind that rustles through the highland grass. The skeletal remains scattered among the Plain of Jars tell a fractured story, one of ritual and remembrance etched into bone fragments and burial goods. Archaeologists sifting through the red clay earth have uncovered skulls bearing deliberate perforations, their edges smoothed by time, suggesting a practice where the dead were exposed to the elements before secondary burial inside the jars. Nearby, clusters of ceramic vessels filled with charred human teeth and tiny finger bones whisper of excarnation rites, where bodies were left to decompose until only the most durable remnants remained for collection. These aren't random acts of disposal, they're echoes of a belief system that saw death as a slow, sacred unraveling. Iron Age burial customs across Southeast Asia add layers to the mystery. At Site 52, researchers found glass beads from India and bronze bracelets with Chinese motifs nestled beside skeletal remains, proof that these weren't isolated communities, but participants in a sprawling trade network that honored their dead with foreign treasures. The positioning of the bones offers another clue. Many skulls face westward, mirroring regional traditions that associated the setting sun with the journey to the afterlife. Even the jars themselves might have been part of this cosmology. Their cylindrical shapes, some theorists suggest, could symbolize vessels for the soul's transition, their open mouths forever waiting to catch whispers from the world beyond. Yet contradictions linger. While most jars contain only fragments of bone, a few reveal complete skeletons curled in fetal positions, a stark contrast to the typical excarnation process. This divergence raises unsettling questions. Were these individuals granted different rights due to status, or did their deaths occur during seasons when exposure wasn't feasible? The presence of infant bones in smaller jars complicates the narrative further, hinting at grieving rituals specific to the youngest members of this lost society. The most poignant discovery came in 2021, when ground-penetrating radar revealed a previously unknown burial pit beneath a toppled jar. Inside, 7 skeletons lay in a radial pattern, their arms interlaced as if holding one another in death. Grave goods here included iron knives and blackened pottery shards, items that, in other contexts, might suggest warrior burials, but the real shock was the absence of trauma on the bones. These weren't battlefield casualties, they were a carefully arranged group, possibly felled by disease or famine, united in their passage to whatever lay beyond. What emerges isn't a single funeral practice, but a tapestry of traditions woven across centuries. The plane of jars refuses to conform to our categories, each excavation peeling back another layer of complexity. These weren't mere containers for the dead, they were witnesses to a civilization's evolving dialogue with mortality. Their silent stones holding stories we're only beginning to decipher. And with 80% of the site still unexplored due to unexploded ordnance, the deepest truths may remain buried, waiting for the day when the land is safe enough to yield its secrets. High on the wind-swept Altiplano of western Bolivia, an ancient labyrinth stretches across the earth so vast it defies comprehension, the Sajoma Lines. Imagine standing at the foot of Mount Sajoma, the snow-capped volcano towering nearly 21,000 feet above sea level, and squinting at the horizon. What first appears as faint scratches on the desert floor resolves into something extraordinary. Over 16,000 perfectly straight pathways etched into the landscape, radiating outward like a colossal spiderweb. These aren't mere animal trails or erosion patterns. Each line is a meticulously cleared path, some up to 20 feet wide and stretching for miles in laser-straight formations, intersecting at precise angles to form geometric shapes visible only from the air. Collectively, they cover an area larger than the island of Manhattan, making them the largest known archaeological artwork on Earth, dwarfing even the famous Nazca Lines to the west. What's baffling isn't just their scale, it's their purpose. Unlike the Nazca Lines, which depict animals and deities, the Sajoma Lines are purely geometric, a network of arteries connecting sacred sites, mountaintop shrines, and ancient burials. One leading theory suggests they were pilgrimage routes for the Karangas and other Aymara peoples, physical manifestations of spiritual journeys toward the sacred Apus mountain deities. Walk these paths today and you'll find cairns and pottery shards marking ceremonial stops where travelers once left offerings to Pachamama, the earth goddess. But here's the twist: many lines align with celestial events. During solstices, certain pathways frame the sunrise like a Stonehenge of the Andes, while others point directly to the Southern Cross constellation. Could these have been both roads and observatories, guiding feet and eyes toward the heavens? The engineering behind the lines is equally mesmerizing. Without satellites or theodolites, how did ancient cultures plot such flawless trajectories across 50 square miles of rugged terrain? Archaeologists suspect they used a combination of smoke signals and aligned stone markers, small piles of rocks called apashitas visible from one path to the next. Experiments with reconstructed tools show that teams of surveyors could have maintained straight lines using nothing more than ropes and sighting poles, correcting for elevation changes by referencing distant mountain peaks. Yet the sheer coordination required hints at a society far more organized than historians once believed. The most haunting question isn't how they were made, but why they've been so overlooked. While the Nazca Lines became an UNESCO World Heritage Site decades ago, the Sajoma Lines remain relatively obscure, their fragile traces fading under hooves of grazing llamas and the tires of occasional off-road vehicles. Part of the mystery lies in their subtlety. From ground level, the lines vanish into the Earth's folds, their grandeur revealed only from above. Even satellite imagery struggles to capture their full complexity as shifting light and dust obscure their outlines. Perhaps the line's true power lies in their duality. They are both map and metaphor, a physical network connecting villages and temples, but also a spiritual web linking earth to sky, the living to the ancestors. Unlike the Nazca geoglyphs, which feel like messages to the gods, the Sajoma Lines seem designed for humans to walk, to experience. They're not just art, they're a participatory ritual frozen in time. And as modern researchers trace their paths with drones and GPS, they're discovering something profound. These lines aren't relics of a lost civilization. They're a living landscape, still whispering their secrets to those who know how to listen. The Nazca Lines don't just connect points on a map, they weave through the spiritual DNA of the Aymara people, whose ancestors likely carved these sacred pathways centuries before the Inca Empire rose to power. For the Aymara, mountains weren't just geological features, they were living deities called apus, and the lines served as physical conduits to their celestial realms. Walk these paths during the June solstice, and you'll witness how certain alignments frame the sunrise with uncanny precision, as if the Earth itself were a colossal sundial. This wasn't accidental geometry. Recent archaeoastronomy studies reveal clusters of lines pointing toward the Southern Cross and Alpha Centauri, stars central to Aymara cosmology, believed to govern agricultural cycles and ancestral guidance. The Karangas, an Aymara subgroup inhabiting the region since at least 1200 AD, left behind stone shrines called wakas along the lines, many containing offerings of llama fetuses and burned coca leaves. These weren't roadside rest stops, they were ritual waypoints where travelers exchanged earthly energy for divine favor. Spanish chroniclers in the 1600s documented Aymara pilgrimages along straight roads to the gods, describing processions where shamans led followers along these paths, chanting prayers timed to celestial events. The lines, then, were both practical and metaphysical, a fusion of transit system and temple. But the Aymara may have inherited more than they invented. Pottery shards and tool fragments found near older line segments suggest some paths predate Aymara dominance, possibly originating with the Tiwanaku culture, which thrived near Lake Titicaca 1,000 years earlier. The Tiwanaku were master astronomers, their priests tracking Venus and the solstices with stunning accuracy. Could the Nazca Lines be their legacy, expanded by later Aymara pilgrims? The shared reverence for celestial markers, like the alignment of Tiwanaku's Kalasasaya temple with the same stars highlighted by the lines, hints at a cultural continuum stretching back millennia. The mystery deepens when you consider the lines' tactile intimacy. Unlike the Nazca geoglyphs designed to be seen from above, the Nazca Lines demand to be walked. Their width, often matching the span of outstretched arms, creates a visceral experience, guiding travelers into a meditative rhythm. Ethnographers recording Aymara oral histories have uncovered tales of dream walks, where seekers followed specific lines during vision quests, their footsteps syncing with the Earth's energy. Modern scientists have even detected subtle magnetic anomalies along certain paths, though whether these were intentionally engineered or natural phenomena remains hotly debated. What emerges is a portrait of a landscape transformed into liturgy. The lines weren't just drawn on the earth, they were woven into the fabric of daily life, linking markets to sacred springs, births to funerals, harvests to constellations. They challenge the colonial myth of primitive Andean cultures, revealing instead a sophisticated interplay of science and spirit. And as modern Aymara communities revive these ancient pilgrimages, the lines remind us that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only walked one deliberate step at a time. Deep in the mountains of China's Bayan-Ha region, a discovery in 1938 spiraled into one of archaeology's most hotly debated enigmas, the Dropa stones. According to the controversial account, Chinese archaeologist Kai Pu-Te uncovered a network of caves containing neat rows of ancient graves. But it wasn't the skeletal remains that shocked researchers, it was the artifacts buried alongside them. Hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 12 inches in diameter with a hole at the center, lay stacked like forgotten records. Upon closer inspection, the discs revealed a spiraling groove etched with microscopic hieroglyphs unlike any known script. When translated decades later by a professor named Tsum Amnui, the glyphs allegedly told an astonishing story. 12,000 years ago, an alien spacecraft crashed in the remote mountains, stranding its occupants, the diminutive, large-headed Dropa people, who then integrated with local tribes. The implications were staggering. If genuine, the Dropa stones would rewrite human history as proof of prehistoric extraterrestrial contact, but almost immediately red flags emerged. No credible academic institution could verify Tsum Amnui's translations, and the professor himself vanished from records after publishing his findings in a fringe journal. The original discs supposedly disappeared during World War II chaos, leaving only blurry photographs and second-hand accounts. Skeptics dismissed the story as an elaborate hoax, pointing to similarities with sci-fi tropes of the era. Yet tantalizing fragments of evidence kept the debate alive. In 1962, Russian scientists examined a few surviving disks, reporting unusual metallic properties and high cobalt content, traits inconsistent with local geology. Then there were the skeletons. Some claimed the cave remains had unusually large craniums and slender limbs, though no physical evidence survives today. What makes the Dropa stones so compelling isn't just their extraterrestrial claims, it's how they reflect our fascination with lost knowledge. The disc's spiral grooves mirror later by discs from China's Neolithic Liangzhu culture, ceremonial jade objects symbolizing heaven. Could the Dropa legend be a garbled memory of an ancient advanced civilization, or perhaps a psychological Rorschach test where we project modern UFO lore onto ambiguous artifacts? The truth may lie somewhere between hoax and historical echo. Recent investigations reveal a surprising twist. Anthropologists note that the Khamba people of Tibet tell ancestral stories of short, yellow-faced beings who descended from clouds, strikingly similar to Dropa descriptions. Meanwhile, linguists have identified rare scripts like the undeciphered Zhao-Ochuan symbols from nearby Sichuan, proving ancient China hosted obscure writing systems. Even if the discs themselves are lost, their legend endures as a mirror to humanity's oldest question. Are we alone in the universe, or have the answers been buried in plain sight all along? The Dropa stone's extraterrestrial origin story crumbles under the harsh light of modern scrutiny, not because the idea isn't thrilling, but because the evidence simply doesn't hold up. Start with the most glaring issue: provenance. No credible museum or university has ever examined the original discs. The few blurry photographs that exist show objects strikingly similar to Bai discs, ceremonial jade artifacts well documented in Chinese archaeology. These Bai discs, dating back to the Liangzhu culture around 3000 B.C., were grave goods meant to guide the dead to heaven, a far cry from alien manuscripts. Even the stone's alleged discoverer, Kai Pu Te, vanishes from academic records after 1947, with no peer-reviewed publications or institutional affiliations to substantiate his claims. Then there's the translation controversy. Tsum Amnui, the professor who supposedly decoded the spiraling hieroglyphs, isn't listed in any Chinese academic registries of the era. His translation first appeared in a Soviet fringe science magazine, Sputnik, in 1967, a publication more interested in sensationalism than scholarly rigor. Linguists point out that the script described bears no resemblance to any known ancient writing system, yet suspiciously mirrors mid-century ufology tropes. The Dropa's alleged plea, "We came from the clouds and were stranded here," reads like a sci-fi B-movie script, not the nuanced language of a genuine prehistoric text. Material analysis further undermines the stone's authenticity. Russian scientist Vyacheslav Sazev's claim that the discs contained high cobalt levels and unusual metallurgical properties has never been replicated. Modern spectrographic techniques applied to similar stones from the region reveal nothing but ordinary granite and serpentine materials any Neolithic culture could have carved. Even the unusual spiral grooves match known drilling techniques from ancient China, where craftsmen used bow-driven drills to create precise channels in jade. The skeletons, often cited as proof of alien biology, dissolve into myth under scrutiny. No physical remains from the alleged cave exist in any museum or lab. The descriptions, large skulls, slender limbs, echo publicity stunts like the 1920s mitochondrial Eve hoax, where manipulated photos of elongated skulls were passed off as extraterrestrial. Anthropologists note that Himalayan populations naturally exhibit slight variations in cranial structure due to altitude adaptation, a far more plausible explanation than interstellar visitors. Perhaps the most damning evidence lies in the timing. The Dropa story gained traction in the 1960s, coinciding with both the space race and a surge in UFO fascination. It's no accident that the narrative mirrors period Pulp Fiction helpless aliens, crash landings, cryptic messages themes that sold magazines but lacked scientific merit. Even the name Dropa seems contrived. No historical Chinese or Tibetan texts mention such a tribe, while the term itself first appears in Western articles, not indigenous records. Yet the stone's persistence in popular culture reveals something deeper than gullibility. They tap into a universal hunger for mysteries that challenge orthodox history, for artifacts that whisper of forgotten worlds. The Dropa stones may be a modern myth, but their legacy endures as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the line between archaeology and fantasy is often as thin as the grooves on a carved stone disc. And in that space between fact and fabrication, the most enduring mysteries are born. In the quiet countryside of Elbert County, Georgia, a towering granite monument once stood, its cryptic messages etched in 8 modern languages, a relic not of ancient times but of the late 20th century. The Georgia Guidestones, erected in 1980 by an anonymous group under the pseudonym R.C. Christian, were no ordinary structure, often called America's Stonehenge. Its 4 massive slabs crowned with a capstone bore 10 directives for a new age of reason, blending utopian ideals with eerie apocalyptic undertones. Unlike the ancient mysteries we've explored, this was a deliberate modern puzzle, one that invited speculation, controversy, and ultimately destruction. The Guidestone's first commandment set the tone: maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. This single line, alongside calls for global unity, controlled reproduction, and the guidance of reason, sparked fierce debate. Was it a blueprint for sustainable living or a dystopian vision of population control? The ambiguity deepened with the monument's astronomical alignments, slots, and holes designed to track the sun's solstices and equinoxes, echoing ancient solar observatories like Stonehenge. Yet unlike those prehistoric sites whose builders left no written explanations, the Guidestone's creators hid in plain sight, leaving behind a paper trail just opaque enough to fuel conspiracy theories. Then came the mystery of R.C. Christian. The name, later revealed to be a pseudonym, was a nod to the Rosicrucian order, a secretive fraternity with roots in Renaissance Europe. The group's spokesman claimed to represent a small group of loyal Americans, but their true identities and motives remained shrouded. Bank records, stone supplier receipts, and even the land purchase were meticulously anonymized, as if designed to provoke questions rather than provide answers. This wasn't the work of shadowy ancients, it was a modern performance of secrecy, a deliberate echo of history's unsolved riddles. The Guidestones' abrupt demolition in 2022, just decades after their construction, only amplified their mystique. A controlled explosion reduced the monument to rubble following years of vandalism and protests, with opponents decrying its globalist agenda. Suddenly, a modern enigma became a relic itself, joining the ranks of the Tarim mummies and the Tartaria tablets as another fragment of human curiosity left for future generations to decipher. What sets the Guidestones apart isn't just their message, but their juxtaposition of ancient form and modern intent. Where the Nazca Lines or Sacsayhuaman's walls were products of their time, the guidestones were a conscious throwback, a deliberate attempt to carve mystery into the 21st century. They challenge us to ask, are we creating the future's ancient puzzles? And if so, what will they say about us when we're gone? The stones are silent now, but their questions linger, a testament to humanity's unending dance with the unknown. The moment the Georgia Guidestones were erected, whispers of secret societies began swirling like autumn leaves caught in a storm. The pseudonym R.C. Christian wasn't just a veil of anonymity, it was a flare sent up for conspiracy theorists. That name, as devotees of Esoterica quickly noted, echoed the legendary Christian Rosenkreutz, founder of the Rosicrucian Order, a 17th century fraternity obsessed with alchemy, hidden knowledge, and societal transformation. Suddenly, a granite monument in rural Georgia wasn't just a curiosity. It was a cipher waiting to be cracked, a modern-day manifesto wrapped in the trappings of ancient mystery cults. But the Rosicrucian connection was just the beginning. The Guidestones' emphasis on population control and global governance had survivalist communities convinced it was a blueprint for a new world order. Online forums lit up with theories that the stones were a decoy doctrine, deliberately provocative instructions meant to distract from a deeper agenda. Some pointed to the monument's alignment with celestial events, suggesting it was a landing beacon for shadowy elites planning a future coup. Others saw the hand of the Georgia Guidestones architects in everything from climate change policies to cryptocurrency trends, weaving a narrative where every global shift was preordained by this enigmatic council. Then there were the numbers. The Guidestones' insistence on maintaining a global population of 500 million, a drastic reduction from current figures, set off alarm bells. Survivalists stockpiled supplies, certain the monument's creators were signaling an impending catastrophe meant to cull humanity. The stones' cold, calculated language, guide reproduction wisely, fueled dystopian fears of forced sterilizations or pandemics engineered by unseen puppet masters. Even the choice of languages etched into the granite English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian was dissected for clues, with some claiming the selection revealed a secret geopolitical alliance. Yet the most haunting twist came from an unexpected source: rural locals. Long before the Guidestones became an internet obsession, farmers in Elbert County reported strange occurrences: unmarked helicopters circling the site at night, black-suited visitors taking measurements under the guise of maintenance. These anecdotes, whether rooted in fact or folklore, added layers to the mythos, transforming the stones from a philosophical oddity into something more sinister. When the monument was demolished in 2022, the rubble didn't silence the theories, it amplified them. The controlled explosion was, to believers, proof the elites were erasing evidence, a soft disclosure hidden in plain sight. What makes the Guidestones' conspiracy theories so enduring isn't just their audacity, but their adaptability. Like a Rorschach test etched in granite, they reflect whatever fears or ideologies we bring to them. Whether viewed as a warning, a threat, or an elaborate hoax, the stones refuse to be neutral. They demand interrogation, ensuring their mystery lingers long after the last slab was reduced to dust. In the end, perhaps that was always the point: not to provide answers, but to provoke questions that outlive the stone itself. From the towering moai of Easter Island to the whispering voids inside the Great Pyramid, these 50 mysteries aren't just footnotes in history, they're gaping holes in the tapestry of time, threads pulled loose that refuse to be rewoven. What binds them together isn't just their age or their strangeness, but the way they force us to reconsider the very boundaries of human achievement. Think about it. Every time we unearth an artifact like the Antikythera Mechanism or stumble upon a place like Göbekli Tepe, we're not just adding to the historical record, we're rewriting it. These enigmas whisper that our ancestors were far more than primitive hunter-gatherers or rudimentary farmers. They were astronomers, engineers, and storytellers whose brilliance flickered brightly enough to pierce the darkness of millennia. But here's the real magic: these mysteries aren't locked in the past. They're alive, evolving with every technological leap. Ground-penetrating radar scans the depths of Sacsayhuaman's walls. AI deciphers the Voynich Manuscript's cryptic symbols, and satellites map the Nazca Lines in Bolivia with pixel-perfect precision. Each advancement peels back another layer, revealing how much we still don't know. That's the thrill of it all. History isn't a solved equation. It's a living, breathing puzzle where every answer spawns 10 new questions. So now it's your turn. Which of these 50 mysteries keeps you up at night? Is it the Tarim mummies with their otherworldly gaze, or the Dropa stone's cosmic riddle? Maybe it's the way the Longyou Cave's acoustics turn whispers into thunder, or the eerie precision of the Karnak stones standing guard over Brittany like petrified sentinels. Drop your favorite in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into the shadows of history, hit that subscribe button. Because the past isn't done surprising us yet, and neither are we.